Evelyn Hart watched them carry her mother's piano through the door, the last beautiful thing in a house stripped to bare walls. She had 48 hours before the sheriff would escort her into the street with nothing but the dress on her back. No money, no family, no future in Boston. Only one envelope remained, a letter from a stranger offering marriage on a Montana ranch she'd never seen. It wasn't romance that made her pack her bag that night. It was the cold mathematics of survival. Marry a man she'd never met, or disappear into poverty's brutal grip. This is the story of a woman who gambled everything on a stranger's honesty and discovered that sometimes the most practical choice becomes the greatest love story ever told. If you're watching from your city tonight, drop a comment below and let me know where this story is reaching. I love seeing how far these tales travel. And if you enjoy this journey, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Now let's begin. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the empty parlor like a death knell. Rosewood settee, excellent condition. Do I hear $20? Evelyn Hart stood in the corner of what had been her father's study, her back pressed against faded wallpaper where his portraits had hung for 20 years. The rectangular shadows remained, cleaner than the surrounding wall, ghost frames marking everything that was gone. Her hands were folded so tightly that her knuckles had gone white, fingernails cutting crescents into her palms. She welcomed the sharp pain. It was the only thing keeping her from screaming. 25, 30, sold to the gentleman in the gray coat. The settee had been her mother's favorite. Evelyn remembered her there, embroidery hoop in hand, laughing at something Evelyn's father had said. That was before the cough, before the slow decline, before death had taken her and left Evelyn with a father who'd tried to drown his grief in cards, whiskey, and increasingly desperate business ventures. Now even the settee was gone. She forced herself to watch as two men hefted it through the doorway, careful not to scratch the carved legs. They treated it better than they'd treated her. The auctioneer had barely glanced her direction when she'd arrived that morning. To him, she was simply another creditor's headache, an inconvenient remnant of a dead man's failures. Mahogany desk, imported hardware, brass fittings. Her father's desk, the one where he'd taught her to read ledgers, to understand accounts, to see the patterns in numbers that told the real story behind polite business talk. Always look at what the numbers say, Evelyn, he'd told her, his hand steady on her shoulder. Men lie. Numbers don't. The numbers had told the truth in the end. They'd revealed every bad investment, every loan taken against future income that never materialized, every desperate attempt to recover losses by risking more. By the time the apoplexy took him 3 months ago, he'd left her nothing but a house of cards that had finally collapsed. $40, 45, sold! The desk disappeared through the door. Evelyn's chest felt tight, her breathing shallow. The study was nearly empty now. Just her, the auctioneer, and a small crowd of bargain hunters picking through the corpse of her family's life. The November cold seeped through the walls. They'd stopped paying for coal 2 months ago, and she'd been burning furniture in the kitchen stove just to keep one room warm enough for survival. Gentleman's wardrobe, cherry wood, beveled mirror. She couldn't watch anymore. She turned and walked into the hallway, her footsteps hollow on bare floors. The house felt cavernous now, every room echoing with absence. The curtains were gone. The carpets were gone. The mirrors, the lamps, the china, the silver, all gone. Strangers had walked through her home for 3 days, pointing at things, discussing values, haggling over pieces of her life as if she weren't standing right there. She climbed the stairs to her bedroom, grateful that her few remaining possessions were protected by law. A bed, a trunk, clothing, personal items that creditors couldn't touch, though one had tried, arguing that her mother's pearl earrings constituted luxury assets. The judge had disagreed, thank God, though he'd made it clear that his mercy extended no further. "You have until Wednesday, Miss Hart," he'd said, his voice not unkind but utterly implacable. "After that, the property transfers to Mr. Holbrook to satisfy the primary debt. You'll need to make other arrangements." Other arrangements. The phrase was a polite fiction. Women of her class didn't make arrangements. They relied on family. But her mother's people had disowned her father years ago, and his family had never approved of the marriage to begin with. They relied on marriage, but what man wanted a penniless woman with no dowry, no connections, and a father who died in debt and scandal? She stood at her bedroom window, looking down at the street. Boston's November afternoon was gray and bitter, the sky heavy with the promise of snow. People hurried past, bundled in wool, their breath steaming. Normal people with normal lives, heading to warm homes and hot dinners and futures that extended beyond 48 hours. Evelyn pressed her forehead against the cold glass. She'd tried. God, she'd tried everything. She'd swallowed her pride and called on her mother's former friends, women who'd taken tea in the parlor below, who'd admired that rosewood settee, who'd praised her mother's embroidery. Every door had closed. Politely, with regret, but firmly. Some hadn't even opened. Servants had been instructed to turn her away. She'd visited employment agencies. "Can you cook?" they'd asked. "Not really." "So?" "Only basic mending." 10 children? She'd never had younger siblings. Previous experience in service? None. She was educated, could keep accounts, read Latin and French, play piano. All useless skills for a woman who needed wages. "I'm sorry, miss," the last agent had said, his tone suggesting he wasn't sorry at all. "You're not qualified for governess work. No references. You're overqualified for household service. Employers don't trust educated girls. They cause trouble. And you're too old to train as apprentice to a trade." Too old. She was 23. The trunk beside her bed held everything she owned now. 3 dresses. One for day, one for evening, one for morning that she was still wearing. Undergarments. Her mother's pearl earrings and wedding ring. A cameo brooch. Her father's pocket watch, though it had stopped working months ago and she couldn't afford repair. A book of Shakespeare's sonnets, a silver hairbrush, and an envelope. She'd been carrying it in her pocket for 2 weeks, the paper soft from handling. She didn't need to open it. She'd memorized every word. But she took it out anyway, unfolding it carefully, reading it again by the gray afternoon light. "Miss Hart, my name is Lucas Reed. I own a cattle ranch outside of Stillwater, Montana Territory. I am writing in response to your notice in the matrimonial news. I am 32 years old. I have owned my ranch for 6 years. The land is good. The house is sound. I employ 2 men year-round and additional hands during roundup. I am not wealthy, but I am solvent, and the ranch produces steady income. I am widowed. My wife died 4 years ago in childbirth, along with our daughter. I do not expect romantic attachment, but I require a partner capable of managing a household and understanding ranch accounts. I will not tolerate drunkenness, cruelty, or dishonesty. In return, I offer the same, along with respect, safety, and financial security. If you are willing to come west, I will send money for passage. If you arrive and find the situation intolerable, I will provide return fare, no questions asked. I will not trap any woman in marriage against her will. The choice is yours. Lucas Reed. The letter had arrived like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known how to pray. She'd placed the advertisement in desperation 3 months ago, when the creditors first started circling. A small notice in the back pages of a paper she'd found at the lending library. Boston lady, educated, good family, seeks correspondence with respectable gentlemen interested in matrimony. References available. She'd received 14 responses. 5 had been obscene. 4 had been from men clearly looking for servants, not wives. 3 had been from elderly widowers seeking nurses. 1 had been semi-literate and frankly terrifying. And 1 had been from Mr. Garrett, a shopkeeper in Pennsylvania who'd seemed reasonable until she'd learned he had 6 children under the age of 10 and expected her to manage them all while also working in his store for no wages. Lucas Reed's letter had been different, blunt, honest to the point of harshness, but also fair. He'd offered her an escape and a way back. He'd given her choice at a time when she had none. She'd written back immediately. They'd exchanged 3 more letters, hers carefully composed to present herself truthfully without revealing the full extent of her desperation, his equally careful to describe ranch life without romanticizing its hardships. He'd sent facts. The house had 4 rooms, a good well, a root cellar. Winters were brutal. The nearest town was 6 miles. Neighbors were few and far between. She would need to learn skills she didn't currently have: cooking, preserving food, managing chickens, tending a garden. "I will teach you what you need to know," he'd written. "I'm not expecting a ranch wife ready-made. I'm expecting a woman willing to learn." In his last letter, he'd included money for passage and a date. November 30th, the Stillwater station, 2 o'clock. 3 weeks away. She'd accepted. Downstairs, she heard the auctioneer's voice rise with enthusiasm. Steinway piano, 1851, rosewood case, ivory keys, excellent tone. Evelyn closed her eyes. That piano had been her mother's pride. Her mother had taught her to play, patient hands guiding Evelyn's small fingers over the keys, voice soft with encouragement. Some of Evelyn's clearest memories were of her mother playing in the evening, her father reading nearby, and everything feeling safe and permanent and good. She heard the bidding climb, $50, $75, $100. She folded the letter carefully and placed it back in her pocket. Wednesday morning, she would walk out of this house with one trunk and no destination except a train platform. She would travel 2,000 miles to marry a man whose face she'd never seen, whose voice she'd never heard, whose character she knew only through carefully composed letters that might or might not reflect truth. It was insane. It was terrifying. It was the only choice she had. The train station was chaos. Evelyn stood on the platform with her trunk at her feet, buffeted by crowds of people shouting goodbyes, porters hauling luggage, conductors bellowing destinations. The late November morning was bitterly cold, her breath steaming in the air. She pulled her cloak tighter and tried to orient herself. Boston and Albany, track 3, all aboard. New York Central, northbound, track 7. She needed the westbound Continental, the train that would carry her across half the country. She'd studied the route obsessively, Boston to Chicago, 3 days. Chicago to Omaha, 2 days. Omaha to Cheyenne, another 2. Cheyenne to Stillwater, Montana Territory, one final day on a smaller connecting line that ran north through cattle country. 10 days of travel. 10 days to reconsider. 10 days to talk herself out of this madness. She spotted a conductor and made her way toward him, dragging her trunk. "Excuse me, sir, the Continental?" He barely glanced at her. "Track 12, boards in 20 minutes." He pointed toward the far end of the platform and moved on. Track 12. She started walking, trunk bumping against her legs. The platform stretched endlessly, crowded with travelers of every description. Wealthy families with mountains of luggage and harried servants. Businessmen with briefcases and newspapers. Immigrants clutching bundles, speaking languages she didn't recognize. A group of soldiers, young and loud, heading west to some frontier posting. She reached track 12 and found a spot near the platform's edge, trying to stay out of the flow of traffic. Her trunk sat at her feet like an anchor. Everything she owned, everything she was. A woman nearby was crying, clinging to an older man, her father, perhaps. "I'll write every week," she sobbed. "I promise." Evelyn looked away. There was no one to cry with, no one to promise letters to. She'd said goodbye to the empty house that morning, locked the door, and handed the key to the estate attorney. He'd barely acknowledged her. The transaction was complete. The creditors were satisfied. She was simply a loose end, now tied off. "Continental Express, all aboard for Chicago." The train sat massive and steaming on the tracks, its engine breathing like a dragon. Evelyn picked up her trunk and joined the line of passengers climbing aboard. A porter tried to help with her luggage, but she shook her head. She couldn't afford to tip him. She wrestled the trunk up the steps herself, arms shaking with effort. The passenger car was already half full. She found a seat near the back, hoisted her trunk onto the overhead rack, and settled by the window. The bench was hard, the air close and smelling of coal smoke and humanity. Around her, people were still finding seats, stowing bags, calling last-minute instructions to people on the platform. A family settled across from her. Mother, father, 3 small children. The mother looked exhausted, the father harried. The children immediately started fighting over who got the window seat. "Tommy, that's enough. Sarah, sit down. No, you can't have a cookie now." Evelyn turned to look out the window. The platform was a sea of faces, all strangers. The gray Boston morning looked exactly like every November morning of her life. Cold, familiar, unforgiving. The train jerked once, then again. The wheels began to turn. She pressed her hand against the window glass as the station started to slide past. Faster now, the platform becoming a blur. The city opening up around her, buildings and streets and church spires she'd known her entire life. The Charles River, steel gray in the winter light. The neighborhood spreading out, then thinning, then giving way to countryside. Boston disappeared behind her. Evelyn sat back against the hard bench and folded her hands in her lap. There was no turning back now. The train was moving, carrying her west toward a territory she'd never seen, a man she'd never met, a life she couldn't even imagine. She felt hollow, emptied out, as if some essential part of her had been left behind in that empty house with the shadow frames on the walls. The little girl across from her was staring at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mama, why is that lady sad?" "Hush, Sarah, don't be rude." The mother smiled apologetically at Evelyn. Evelyn tried to smile back, but her face wouldn't cooperate. She turned back to the window and watched Massachusetts blur past. The journey was long. Chicago was noise and smoke and overwhelming crowds. Evelyn had 3 hours between trains, which she spent in the station waiting room, guarding her trunk and trying not to be jostled by the constant flow of humanity. She bought a bread roll and an apple from a vendor, eating slowly to make it last. The money Lucas had sent was carefully budgeted, enough for passage and modest meals, with a small amount left over for emergencies. She couldn't afford to waste any of it. The westbound train was rougher than the Boston Express. Older cars, harder seats, more crowded. She ended up sharing a bench with an older woman traveling to visit her daughter in Iowa, who talked for 6 hours straight about her grandchildren until Evelyn thought she might scream. When the woman finally dozed off, Evelyn felt a guilty sense of relief. Nebraska was flat, impossibly, endlessly flat. The train rolled through it for what felt like eternity, mile after mile of prairie grass and huge sky, and nothing else. Evelyn had never seen so much space. It made her feel tiny, insignificant, a small person making a small decision that would matter to no one but herself. At night, she dozed fitfully, her head against the window, jerking awake every time the train slowed or someone walked past. Her back ached. Her neck was stiff. She was hungry and thirsty and tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. In Omaha, she had 8 hours to wait. She found a bench in the station and sat with her trunk, watching people come and go, families, businessmen, cowboys with dusty hats and spurs that jingled, a group of Chinese workers speaking in rapid, tonal conversation, an Indian woman with a baby strapped to her back. The West was nothing like Boston. The faces were different. The clothes were different. Even the air felt different, drier, thinner, carrying scents of dust and distance. A man approached her, smiling too widely. "All alone, miss?" "That's not safe." "Let me help you." "No, thank you." "No." She kept her voice firm, her eyes cold. He lingered. "Come now, a pretty girl like you shouldn't—" "I said no." She stared at him until he muttered something unpleasant and walked away. She was learning. Boston manners didn't work here. Politeness was taken as invitation. She needed to be harder. The train to Cheyenne was even rougher. The seats were wooden. The car smelled of sweat and tobacco. Men spat chewing tobacco into the aisle. Someone was drinking whiskey from a flask, passing it around despite the conductor's half-hearted objections. Evelyn kept her eyes down, her hands folded, her entire being focused on taking up as little space as possible. Wyoming was mountains, real mountains. Not the rolling hills of New England, but massive peaks that tore into the sky, still crowned with snow even though it was late November. The train climbed through them, engine laboring, and Evelyn stared out at landscape that looked like another planet. Rock faces, pine forests, valleys so deep she couldn't see the bottom, and over it all that enormous sky, bigger than anything she'd ever imagined. Beautiful, terrifying, completely alien. At Cheyenne, she changed to the final train, a smaller line running north into Montana territory. The car was half empty, most passengers cowboys or miners or railroad workers. She sat alone and watched the landscape change again. The mountains gave way to high plains, rolling and vast, covered in brown grass that rippled in the wind like an ocean. Here and there, she saw cattle, small, dark shapes in the distance. Once, a group of riders appeared on a ridge, silhouetted against the sky, then vanished. This was cattle country, Lucas Reed's country. The reality of what she was doing hit her in waves. She was going to marry a stranger. She was going to live on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. She was going to spend the rest of her life in this empty, enormous land where the sky was too big and the distances were too great and everything she'd ever known was 2,000 miles away. Her hands started shaking. She gripped them together, forcing herself to breathe slowly. In, out, in, out. She couldn't fall apart now, not when she'd come this far, not when there was no going back. The train rolled north through the afternoon. The sun sank toward the western horizon, painting the plains gold and amber. Shadows stretched long. The temperature dropped. Evelyn pulled her cloak tighter and watched darkness fall across Montana territory. The conductor walked through, calling out stops. Wolf Creek, next stop, Stillwater. Stillwater. Her heart started racing. The train began to slow. Through the window, she saw lights in the distance, a small cluster of buildings. The town, her destination, the end of the journey, the beginning of everything else. The train hissed to a stop. Evelyn stood on shaking legs and pulled her trunk down from the rack. Other passengers were already moving toward the door. She joined them, trunk in hand, and stepped out into the Montana night. The platform was small, just a wooden structure with a roof and a single lantern. The town beyond was dark, except for a few lit windows. The air was shockingly cold, sharp enough to hurt her lungs. And the silence. After 10 days of train noise, the silence felt enormous. A man was waiting on the platform. He stood near the lantern, tall and still, wearing a heavy coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. As the other passengers dispersed, he stepped forward. "Miss Hart?" His voice was deep, quiet, careful. Evelyn's mouth was dry. "Mr. Reed?" "Yes, ma'am." They stood looking at each other across 6 feet of platform. The lantern light was dim, but she could make out some details. Broad shoulders, rough hands, a face weathered by sun and wind. Older than she'd expected, though she wasn't sure why. He'd told her he was 32. There was nothing soft about him. Nothing polished. He looked exactly like what he was. A man who worked with his hands in hard country. "How was your journey?" he asked. The question was so normal, so civilized that it almost made her laugh. "Long," she managed. "Very long." He nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. "I have a wagon. Hotel's a short ride. I've arranged a room for you." "A room?" "You'll want to rest. We can talk in the morning." He picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing and started walking toward the edge of the platform. Evelyn followed, her legs unsteady after days on the train. A wagon sat in the darkness, a plain, practical work vehicle hitched to 2 horses. Lucas Reed loaded her trunk into the back with economical movements, then offered his hand to help her up. His hand was rough with calluses, warm despite the cold. She climbed onto the bench and he followed, taking up the reins. The wagon lurched into motion, wheels crunching on frozen ground. The town passed around them, dark buildings, empty streets, a dog barking somewhere. Everything small, everything quiet. "It's not much," Lucas Reed said, his eyes on the road ahead. "The town, about 200 people. General store, livery, blacksmith, hotel, saloon, church on Sundays. Doctor comes through once a month." "I see." "Ranch is 6 miles out. Good land. Creek runs through it. House is sound." He was giving her facts, practical information. Evelyn appreciated that. She didn't think she could handle polite conversation right now. They reached the hotel, a 2-story building with light in the windows. Lucas stopped the wagon and climbed down, then helped her descend. He retrieved her trunk. "I'll carry this in. Room's already paid for." Inside, the hotel was warm and smelled of wood smoke and coffee. A woman behind the desk smiled at them. "Mr. Reed, you must be Miss Hart. Welcome to Stillwater." "Thank you." "Room's at the top of the stairs, second door on the right. Breakfast is served at 7. Lucas carried her trunk up the stairs and set it down outside the room. He pulled a key from his pocket and handed it to her. "Get some rest," he said. "I'll come by at 9 tomorrow morning. We can talk then." Evelyn took the key. Her hand was shaking again. "Mr. Reed." "Lucas?" "Lucas." The name felt strange in her mouth. Thank you." He nodded. "No need for thanks. You came a long way. That took courage." He paused, then added quietly, "Sleep well, Miss Hart." He turned and walked back down the stairs, his footsteps heavy on the wood. Evelyn heard the front door open and close, then silence. She unlocked her room and went inside. It was small but clean. A bed with a quilt, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, a chair, a window looking out onto the dark street. Evelyn set her bag down and sank onto the bed. 10 days of travel, 2,000 miles. And here she was, in a hotel room in Montana Territory, waiting to marry a stranger. She should feel terrified. Instead, she felt numb, empty, as if she'd used up all her fear and anxiety during the journey and had nothing left. She unlocked her trunk and pulled out her nightgown, then washed her face in the basin. The water was cold but clean. She changed, braided her hair, and climbed under the quilt. The bed was softer than the train bench. The room was quiet. Outside, she could hear the wind moving through the town, carrying the scent of sagebrush and distance. Tomorrow, she would meet Lucas Reed in daylight. Tomorrow, she would make her final decision. Tonight, she was simply too exhausted to think. Evelyn closed her eyes and fell into dreamless sleep. Morning came with pale sunlight through the window. Evelyn woke disoriented, not remembering where she was. Then it came back in a rush. Montana, Stillwater, Lucas Reed. She sat up, heart pounding, and looked around the small room. Real. This was real. She washed, dressed in her day dress, plain brown wool, practical and modest, and pinned up her hair. Her hands were steadier this morning, though anxiety still hummed beneath her skin. She studied her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Dark hair, gray eyes, pale skin. She looked tired. Thin. Not particularly pretty, though her mother had always said she had a good face, strong features. What did Lucas Reed see when he looked at her? She pushed the thought away and went downstairs. The dining room was small, with 3 tables. A few other guests were eating breakfast. 2 men who looked like traveling salesmen, and an older couple. The woman from the desk appeared with coffee and a plate of eggs, biscuits, and bacon. "Here you are, dear. Eat up. Mr. Reed will be here soon." The food was simple but good. Evelyn ate slowly, trying to settle her nervous stomach. The coffee helped, strong and hot, better than anything she'd had on the train. At exactly 9 o'clock, the front door opened and Lucas Reed walked in. In daylight, he looked different. Evelyn's first impression was of controlled strength, the kind of physical presence that came from years of hard work. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a spare, muscular build. His face was weathered, skin darkened by sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he spent a lot of time squinting into distance. His hair was dark brown, slightly too long, and his jaw was shadowed with a day's growth of beard. He removed his hat and nodded to her. "Miss Hart, morning." "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you." He gestured toward the door. "Would you like to walk? We should talk." She stood, leaving her half-finished coffee. He held the door for her and they stepped outside into the Montana morning. The town looked different in daylight. Small, rough. The main street was dirt, rutted from wagon wheels. The buildings were mostly wood, weathered and practical. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks white against the blue sky. The air was cold and impossibly clean, carrying scents she couldn't name. They walked in silence for a minute. Lucas Reed seemed comfortable with quiet. He didn't rush to fill it with empty words. Finally, he spoke. "I want to be clear about the situation. I know this isn't what you probably imagined when you thought about marriage." Evelyn almost laughed. What had she imagined? At 23, she'd assumed she'd marry someone from Boston society, a lawyer or merchant her father approved of. Love had seemed like something that might grow over time, companionship more important than passion. Then her father had died and imagination had given way to necessity. "I didn't imagine anything, Mr. Reed. I needed an alternative to destitution. You offered one." He glanced at her, something shifting in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or relief that she wasn't going to pretend this was a romance. "I won't lie to you," he continued. "Ranch life is hard. Winter's coming, and it's brutal here. You'll need to learn skills you don't have: cooking, preserving food, managing livestock. The house is 6 miles from town. You could go weeks without seeing another woman." "I understand." "Do you?" He stopped walking and turned to face her. His eyes were gray, like storm clouds. I need you to really understand. I'm not offering you Boston. I'm not offering you comfort or society or any of the things you're used to. I'm offering you a partnership, hard work, honest dealing, and respect. That's all. Evelyn met his gaze steadily. What are you afraid I'm expecting? The bluntness of the question surprised him. She saw it in the slight widening of his eyes, the pause before he answered. I'm afraid you think this will be something it won't be. That you'll get to the ranch and realize you've made a mistake, and then we'll both be trapped. Is that why you offered the return ticket? Yes. She studied him. His face was hard to read, weathered and guarded, the face of a man who'd learned to keep his thoughts private. But there was something in his eyes, not unkindness, just caution, the wariness of someone who'd been hurt before. You loved your wife, she said quietly. His jaw tightened. Yes. I'm not trying to replace her. Good, because you can't. He paused, then added more gently, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to be honest. Sarah was my wife for 4 years. She knew ranching because she grew up on a ranch. She could rope a steer and birth a calf and cook for a crew of 10 without breaking stride. She was suited to this life. And I'm not. I don't know if you are or not. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Evelyn felt a strange calm settling over her. This was good. Honest conversation, no illusions, no pretty lies. I don't love you, she said. I know. I don't know if I'm capable of loving anyone right now. The last year has been difficult. I know that too. I'm here because I'm practical, Mr. Reed. I needed an escape from a situation that was going to destroy me. You offered one. That doesn't mean I'm desperate enough to accept anything. I have standards, even now. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. What standards? Honesty, respect, fair dealing. You've offered all 3 in your letters. If that's real, if you mean what you wrote, then I can make this work. I can learn to cook and preserve food and manage chickens. I can learn to live without society or comfort. What I can't do is live with cruelty or dishonesty or a man who would trap me in a situation I couldn't escape. He was quiet for a long moment. That's fair. They started walking again, slower now. The street stretched ahead of them, empty except for a dog scratching itself in front of the general store. I'll tell you how my wife died, Lucas said suddenly. His voice was carefully level, but Evelyn heard the effort it cost him. She was 8 months pregnant. Everything had been fine. Then she started bleeding. The midwife came, but there was nothing she could do. Sarah died in our bed. The baby, our daughter, died a few minutes later. Evelyn's throat tightened. I'm sorry. It's been 4 years. I've made my peace with it. Mostly. He paused. But I need you to understand, I won't go through that again. I can't have a marriage where I give my heart and then lose it, so I'm offering partnership instead. Respect, safety, honesty, practical things. Things I can control. That's all I'm asking for, Evelyn said quietly. He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or the beginning of trust. Come to the ranch, he said. See it. See the house, the land, what your life would be. Then decide. I meant what I said about the return ticket. The choice has to be yours, freely made. When? Now. I have the wagon. We can ride out, you can look around, and I'll bring you back this evening. Or if you want to stay, there's a spare room. No pressure, no expectations. Evelyn took a breath. This was it. The moment of decision. She thought about Boston, the empty house, the creditors, the closed doors, the future that had narrowed to nothing. She thought about Lucas Reed's letters, the careful honesty, the offer of choice. She thought about the woman she'd been 10 days ago, desperate, frightened, trapped. And the woman she was now, still frightened but moving forward, making decisions, taking control of the only thing she could control, her own choices. All right, she said. Let's go see the ranch. The ride took an hour. They left town heading west, the wagon rolling over rough track that couldn't quite be called a road. The land opened up around them, vast rolling plains covered in brown grass that rippled in the wind. The sky was impossibly huge, pale blue and cloudless. In the distance, mountains rose like a wall, their peaks sharp against the horizon. Lucas handled the horses with easy competence, his attention on the track ahead. He pointed out landmarks as they went. That's Widow's Peak, a distinctive rock formation. Creek runs through that valley, good water year-round. Neighbors are the Crawfords, 3 miles north. Good people. Tom and Martha, 4 kids. Evelyn listened, trying to memorize details. The landscape was overwhelming in its emptiness. She'd never been anywhere this open, this exposed. It made her feel small and vulnerable. Not many trees, she observed. No, wrong climate. There's some cottonwood along the creek, and I planted a windbreak near the house. But mostly it's grass and sage. What about storms? We get them. Thunder in summer, blizzards in winter. Spring can bring tornadoes, though they're rare this far north. He glanced at her. The house is solid, built to withstand weather. They crested a rise and Lucas pulled the horses to a stop. There. Evelyn looked where he pointed and saw it. A house sitting in a shallow valley, with a creek glinting silver nearby. Buildings clustered around it, barn, corral, a few smaller structures. The house itself was wood, painted white, with a covered porch and windows that caught the morning light. It looked neat, well-maintained, lonely. That's home, Lucas said quietly. They descended into the valley. As they got closer, Evelyn could see more details. The vegetable garden, dormant now for winter. The chicken coop. The corral with several horses. A windmill turning slowly in the breeze. Everything functional and orderly. 2 men emerged from the barn as they approached. Lucas raised a hand in greeting. That's Jim and Caleb. They work for me year-round. Good men. He stopped the wagon near the house and climbed down, then helped Evelyn descend. The 2 ranch hands approached, hats in hands. Jim, Caleb, this is Miss Hart. She's visiting from Boston. Ma'am. They nodded respectfully, curious but polite. Miss Hart, Jim manages the cattle operation. Caleb handles horses and maintenance. Between the 3 of us, we keep this place running. Evelyn nodded to them. They were young, mid-20s, she guessed, weathered and capable-looking. They studied her with the frank assessment of men unused to seeing women out here. Pleasure to meet you, Jim said. Will you be staying? That remains to be seen, Lucas said firmly. Miss Hart is making no commitments today. Understood? Yes, sir. The men retreated to the barn. Lucas turned to Evelyn. Let me show you the house. He led her up the porch steps and opened the door. The interior was simple but well built. They entered directly into the main room, a combination kitchen and living area with a stone fireplace, a cast iron stove, a long wooden table with benches, and a few chairs. Shelves along one wall held supplies and cooking equipment. Windows on 2 sides let in good light. Everything was clean but sparse, the home of a man who lived alone and kept things practical. Kitchen, Lucas said unnecessarily. Stove draws well, fireplace heats the room in winter. Water comes from the well outside. There's a hand pump. I usually keep a barrel filled inside during winter so it doesn't freeze. He moved to a doorway. Bedroom here. Evelyn looked into a small room containing a bed, a chest of drawers, and a chair. Plain, masculine. The bed was made with military precision. There's another bedroom on the other side. Lucas opened a second door. This room was smaller, unfurnished except for a narrow bed and a trunk. Storage mostly, but it would be yours if you stayed. Privacy. Your own space. He was being careful, giving her room to breathe. Evelyn appreciated it. And that's it, he finished. 4 rooms. Root cellar outside for storing vegetables. Smokehouse for meat. Outhouse behind the barn. I know that's not what you're used to, but there's no indoor plumbing this far from town. Evelyn walked slowly through the main room, taking it in. It was smaller than any room in her Boston house, more rustic, but it was solid, well made, the kind of place that would stand against whatever weather Montana threw at it. She went to the window and looked out at the valley. The creek sparkled in the sun, the mountains rose beyond, the land rolled away in every direction, empty and vast. What do you think? Lucas asked quietly. Evelyn turned to face him. He stood near the table watching her with that careful expression, hoping, she realized, but trying not to show it, trying not to pressure her. It's lonely, she said honestly. Yes. And beautiful. Yes. And nothing like anything I've ever known. He nodded. That's true. She walked to the table and ran her hand along the smooth wood. Sturdy, practical, built to last. You made this. How did you know? It's like everything else here. Well made. Honest. She looked at him. You built this life yourself, didn't you? The house, the furniture, the ranch? You carved it out of empty land. My father helped. He homesteaded this place, proved up the claim. I inherited it when he died. But yes, most of this I built myself. Why do you want a wife? The question was blunt, but she needed to know. Lucas didn't flinch. Because I'm tired of being alone. Because a ranch runs better with two people. Because I'm 32 and I'd like to have children before I'm too old to raise them. He paused. And because when I lost Sarah, I thought I'd never want anyone else. But time changes things. I don't want romance or passion. Those feel like luxuries I can't afford again. But partnership, companionship, someone to build a life with, that seems possible. Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest. This was the truth, raw and ungarnished. I won't pretend I can love you, she said quietly. Not now. Maybe not ever. I'm not asking for love. But I can work. I can learn. I can be a partner. That's all I need. They stood looking at each other across the clean, spare room. Outside, the wind moved through the valley, carrying the scent of sage and distance. Show me everything, Evelyn said. The barn, the garden, the creek, all of it. I want to understand what I'm choosing. Relief flashed across Lucas's face, quickly controlled. All right. He led her outside and began the tour. The barn was large and well organized, stalls for horses, storage for hay and equipment, everything in its place. The garden area was bigger than she'd expected, with evidence of careful planning, rows marked out, protective fencing against animals. Sarah planted this, Lucas said, his voice neutral. She had a good hand with growing things, got us through winter with plenty of preserved vegetables. The chicken coop held a dozen hens that clucked and scratched in the dirt. The smokehouse smelled of hickory and salt. The creek ran clear and cold, lined with cottonwoods that had lost their leaves for winter. This is where I proposed to Sarah, Lucas said suddenly. They were standing by the creek, watching water flow over smooth stones. Right here, under these trees. It was spring. Everything was green. She said yes before I finished asking. Evelyn waited. He seemed to need to say it. I loved her completely, the kind of love you only get once. He looked at Evelyn. I want you to know that, so you understand what you're getting. A man who's already given that part of himself away. What's left is practical, steady, but not that. I understand. And she did, completely. I'm not asking for your heart, Lucas, just your honesty. You have it. They walked back to the house in comfortable silence. Jim and Caleb were working with horses in the corral, their movements efficient and practiced. Everything on this ranch ran like a clock, well-oiled, dependable, built to function. Could she be part of this? Lucas made coffee on the big iron stove while Evelyn sat at the table watching. His movements in the kitchen were competent but basic. This was a man who cooked for fuel, not pleasure. When he served the coffee in plain tin cups, it was strong enough to strip paint. I'm not a good cook, he admitted. I can make beans, stew, biscuits that won't kill you, but nothing fancy. I'm not much better, Evelyn confessed. We had a cook in Boston. I can make tea and toast and scrambled eggs. That's about it. We'll learn together then. The afternoon passed. They talked, carefully at first, then more easily. Lucas told her about ranch operations, the rhythm of seasons, the challenges of keeping cattle alive through Montana winters. Evelyn told him about Boston, her father's death, the slow dissolution of everything she'd known. I'm not brave, she said at one point. People might think this is brave coming west, but it's not. It's just the only option that didn't feel like dying slowly. That's brave enough, Lucas said. Evening came. Lucas made a simple dinner, beans and cornbread, and they ate while the sun set through the windows, painting the valley gold. Jim and Caleb came in, were served their portions, and ate quickly before retreating to the bunkhouse. Evelyn helped wash the dishes, learning the rhythm of work in a kitchen with no running water. Everything took longer. Everything required more effort. When the dishes were done, Lucas looked at her seriously. "I need to take you back to town. Unless you want to stay. Try it for a day or two. See what it's really like." He held up a hand. "Separate rooms, no pressure. Just seeing if this could work." Evelyn's heart was beating hard. This was the choice, the real choice. She thought about the hotel room in Stillwater, small, temporary, waiting. She thought about Boston, gone, irrevocably lost. She thought about this house, lonely and simple and real, a place where she could build something new. "I'll stay," she said quietly. "Not permanently, not yet, but for a few days. To see." Lucas nodded slowly. "All right, I'll get your trunk from the wagon." That night, Evelyn lay in the small bedroom Lucas had offered her, listening to unfamiliar sounds. The wind against the house, the creak of settling wood. Somewhere outside, a coyote called, a sound that made her skin prickle. She was 2,000 miles from home, in a house with a stranger, on land that went on forever. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Possibility. This could work, this strange, practical arrangement, this partnership with a grieving man in empty country. It wasn't what she'd imagined for her life, but maybe, just maybe, it could be enough. She closed her eyes and listened to the Montana wind and thought about tomorrow and the day after that, and all the days stretching ahead into an uncertain but suddenly open future. The choice was hers. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like a gift. Morning light woke her, pale and cold, filtering through the simple curtains. Evelyn lay still for a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling, the quiet that was somehow louder than any city noise she'd ever known. Then she remembered. Montana. The ranch. Lucas Reed. She'd stayed. The house was silent. She rose quickly, the floor cold against her bare feet, and dressed in the chill air. Her brown wool dress, practical and plain, hair pinned up, hands steady, though her stomach fluttered with nervousness about what came next. When she emerged from her room, she found Lucas already in the kitchen, building up the fire in the stove. He looked up, nodded once. "Morning. Coffee's almost ready." "Good morning." She hesitated in the doorway, suddenly uncertain of the etiquette. This was his house, his space. She was a guest, but also potentially his future wife. Where did she stand? What was expected? Lucas seemed to sense her uncertainty. "Sit. I'll get you coffee, then we'll figure out breakfast together." Together. The word relaxed something in her chest. She sat at the long table and watched him pour coffee into 2 tin cups. He set one in front of her and took a seat across the table, not beside her, she noticed, maintaining respectful distance. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I expected. The quiet is different. Takes getting used to. First few months after I moved out here from my father's place closer to town, I couldn't sleep. Kept waiting for noise that never came." He sipped his coffee, eyes steady on her over the rim. "You'll have questions. Ask them." Evelyn wrapped her hands around the warm cup. Where to start? Everything here was foreign to her, the daily rhythms, the work, the isolation. What would a typical day look like, for me, I mean, if I stayed? Lucas set down his cup. "Winter's different from summer, but I'll tell you winter since that's what's coming. You'd wake around dawn, make breakfast. Simple things. Eggs, if the chickens are laying, biscuits, bacon, or salt pork. Coffee. Feed the chickens, gather eggs. Check the kitchen garden even though nothing's growing, you'd be planning for spring. Cooking dinner takes most of the afternoon, bread, stew, whatever we've got. Mending, washing, basic maintenance. Evenings for accounts, reading, quiet work. That's all? In winter, yes. In summer, there's the garden, planting, weeding, harvesting, preserving food, canning, pickling, smoking meat. Sometimes helping with ranch work if we're short-handed. It's not complicated, Evelyn, just constant." She noticed he'd used her first name. When had they crossed that threshold? "And you? Your days?" checking cattle, mending fence, breaking ice on water troughs in winter. Calving season in spring is brutal, 24-hour days sometimes. Summer roundup, fall gather, constant maintenance on everything. Buildings, equipment, tack. A ranch doesn't give you days off. It sounds exhausting. It is. He refilled his coffee. But it's honest work. You see the results. The cattle grow, the ranch prospers. You build something real. There's satisfaction in that. Evelyn studied him in the morning light. His face was deeply lined around the eyes, weathered by wind and sun. Strong hands wrapped around the cup, scarred and calloused. This was a man shaped by hard work, made competent through necessity. "Tell me about your wife," she said quietly. Not how she died, how she lived. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice careful but not cold. Sarah grew up on a ranch outside of Miles City. She could ride before she could walk, her father used to say. When I met her, she was helping her father with a cattle sale, sharp as a tack with numbers, didn't let anyone cheat them. I was 24, new to ranching, barely keeping my head above water. She saw something in me anyway. He paused, staring into his coffee. She made this place a home, planted that garden, sewed curtains, cooked meals that actually tasted good. She could gentle a horse, pull a calf, shoot a rifle when coyotes got too close to the chickens. She was capable, strong. We were partners in every sense. You must miss her terribly. Every day. He looked up at Evelyn. But I learned something after she died. Missing someone doesn't mean you stop living. It just means you live differently. I'm not looking to replace Sarah. I'm looking to build something new, different but still good. Evelyn felt the honesty of it settle between them. No pretty lies, no false promises, just the truth, raw and real. I can't be her, Evelyn said. I know, I don't want you to be. But I can learn, I can work, I can try to make this partnership you're talking about. Lucas nodded slowly. That's all I'm asking. The kitchen door opened and Jim stepped in, stamping snow from his boots. He stopped short when he saw Evelyn. Oh, sorry, boss. Didn't know Miss Hart was still here. She's staying a few days, Lucas said evenly, getting a feel for the place. Jim's eyebrows rose slightly, but he kept his expression neutral. Yes, sir. Caleb and I were wondering about breakfast. Give us 20 minutes. We'll figure something out. After Jim left, Lucas turned to Evelyn. You up for learning to cook for ranch hands? Her stomach tightened with nervousness, but she nodded. I have to learn sometime. All right, let's start simple. Eggs, bacon, biscuits. I'll talk you through it. The next hour was both humiliating and strangely liberating. Evelyn burned the first batch of bacon, undercooked the eggs, and produced biscuits that Lucas diplomatically described as dense. But he didn't criticize. He just showed her again how to regulate the stove temperature, when to flip the bacon, how to work the biscuit dough just enough but not too much. Cooking out here isn't about perfection, he said, as she kneaded dough for the second attempt. It's about getting food on the table that keeps people working. You'll get better with practice. When they finally served breakfast to Jim and Caleb, the men ate without complaint. The biscuits were edible, if not excellent. The bacon was crispy. The eggs were done. Good breakfast, ma'am, Jim said, and Evelyn couldn't tell if he was being polite or honest. After the men left, Evelyn and Lucas cleaned up together. She washed, he dried, and they worked in companionable silence. The rhythm of it felt strange, domestic in a way she'd never experienced. In Boston, servants had done this work. She'd never understood how much labor went into simply maintaining a household. What now? She asked when the dishes were done. I need to check the cattle in the north pasture. You could come along, see more of the ranch, or stay here, explore the house, rest. Evelyn thought of the empty house, the silence waiting. I'll come with you. Lucas looked surprised but pleased. Get your warmest clothes. It's cold out. 20 minutes later, she was bundled in her cloak and following Lucas to the barn. He saddled 2 horses with efficient movements, then turned to her. You know how to ride? I took lessons as a girl, side saddle, in parks. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. This'll be different. You'll ride astride and the horse won't care about your manners. But Daisy here is gentle. She'll take care of you. He helped her mount. his hand steadying her, respectful but sure. The saddle felt strange sitting astride, her skirts bunched awkwardly. Lucas swung onto his own horse with practiced ease. Just follow me. Keep your heels down, hands steady. Daisy knows the way. They rode out into the cold morning. The valley opened up around them, vast and white-dusted with the previous night's frost. The sky was enormous, pale blue and cloudless. Evelyn's breath steamed in the air, and the cold bit at her cheeks, but there was something exhilarating about it. The openness, the movement, the sense of space. Lucas led them north along the creek, then up into rolling hills. He didn't talk much, just pointed out landmarks occasionally. That's where the property line runs. Crawford's land starts beyond that ridge. Creek forks there. Good fishing in summer. They crested a hill and Evelyn saw the cattle. Dark shapes spread across the brown grass, grazing peacefully. There were more than she'd expected, maybe 100 head. Lucas dismounted and walked among them, checking their condition with a practiced eye. Evelyn stayed mounted, watching. The cattle ignored him, used to his presence. He moved with confidence but no wasted motion, his attention completely focused on the task. After 20 minutes, he remounted and they rode to the top of a nearby ridge. Lucas stopped and gestured at the land spread below them. This is it, 300 acres. Not the biggest ranch in Montana, but it's mine. Paid for. No debt. The grass is good, the water is reliable, and the cattle are healthy. It's not much by some standards, but it's a living, a good living, if you're willing to work for it. Evelyn looked at the land. Rolling hills, the creek cutting silver through the valley, the ranch buildings small in the distance. Lonely country, hard country, but beautiful in its austerity. How long did it take you to build this? 6 years on my own, but my father homesteaded the land, put up the first buildings. He gave me the foundation. I built on it. And you did it alone, after Sarah died. Yes, his voice was quiet. Grief doesn't stop the work. Cattle still need tending. Fences still break. Winter still comes. So you get up, you do what needs doing, and somewhere along the way you realize you're still alive, still building, still moving forward. Evelyn understood that more than he knew. She'd spent months in Boston doing the same thing, getting up, facing each day, moving forward through the wreckage because the alternative was surrender. I know something about that, she said softly. Lucas looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. The acknowledgement of shared experience. I expect you do. They rode back in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Not awkward or uncertain, but comfortable. The silence of two people who didn't need words to communicate understanding. Back at the ranch, Lucas showed her how to unsaddle and brush down the horses. Her arms ached from the unfamiliar work, but she pushed through it. When they finished, her hands smelled of horse and leather, earthy, real smells she'd never encountered in Boston's polite parlors. You did well, Lucas said. Not many city women would ride out in this cold on their second day here. I'm tougher than I look. I'm starting to see that. The afternoon passed in more lessons. Lucas showed her the root cellar, packed with preserved vegetables from Sarah's final garden 3 years ago, jars of beans, pickles, tomatoes. Some had spoiled, he admitted, because he didn't know how to tell if they were still good. We'll use what's safe and throw out the rest, he said. Next summer you'll put up new stores. Sarah's old recipe book is in the kitchen. She wrote down everything. Sarah's book, Sarah's garden, Sarah's kitchen. Evelyn wondered if she'd ever stop feeling like a replacement, filling a space another woman had carved out and left behind. But when she said as much to Lucas, he shook his head. You're not filling Sarah's space. You're making your own. This is your kitchen now if you decide to stay. Your garden next summer, your home. Sarah's gone, Evelyn. I loved her, but she's gone. What we build here, you and me, that's something new. The directness of it steadied her. He wasn't asking her to compete with a ghost. He was asking her to be herself. That evening, Evelyn attempted dinner with less supervision. Lucas sat at the table doing accounts while she fumbled through making stew from salt pork, potatoes, and carrots from the root cellar. It wasn't elegant, but it was edible. When Jim and Caleb came in to eat, they cleaned their plates without complaint. After the men left, Lucas helped her with dishes again. You're getting better already, he said. Liar. But I appreciate the encouragement. That almost smile again. I don't lie, Evelyn. I said you're getting better, and you are. First breakfast was half burned. This dinner was actually good. Good is generous. Good is accurate. He dried the last plate and set it on the shelf. You're learning fast. That matters more than natural talent. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. She wasn't used to praise for practical things. In Boston, women were praised for embroidery and piano playing and witty conversation. Nobody cared if you could cook a decent stew. Thank you, she said quietly. They sat by the fire that evening, Lucas reading a livestock journal, Evelyn with a book she'd found on the shelf, a worn copy of Shakespeare's plays. The firelight flickered across the simple room, warmth pushing back the November cold. Outside, wind moved through the valley, but inside it was peaceful. Evelyn found herself watching Lucas over the top of her book. He was completely focused on his reading, occasionally making notes on a piece of paper. His face in the firelight looked younger, less guarded. She could see traces of the man he'd been before grief carved those lines around his eyes. You're staring, he said without looking up. Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks. Sorry, I was just thinking. About what? She considered lying, then remembered his emphasis on honesty. About whether I can do this. Live here. Be what you need. Lucas set down his journal and looked at her directly. What do you think? After 2 days, what's your honest assessment? Evelyn took a breath. I think it's harder than I imagined. The work, the isolation, the constant effort just to maintain basic comfort. I think I'm terrified of failing, of getting through a Montana winter and realizing I'm not strong enough. She paused. But I also think I might be able to do it. With time, with help, with a partner who's patient enough to teach me. I'm patient. Are you? I broke horses for 3 years when I first started ranching. Patience is something I learned the hard way. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But I need to know you're committed, Evelyn. Not to me, necessarily, but to this. To the life. I can't have you here for 3 months and then decide it's too hard. That would be worse than never marrying at all. How can I know for certain? I've been here 2 days. Stay a week. See a full cycle of ranch life. See what winter really means out here. If at the end of that week you want to leave, I'll take you to town, give you the return ticket, and we'll part as friends. No hard feelings. But if I stay, then we get married, legal and binding. A real partnership, Evelyn. I need that security. I need to know you won't run when things get difficult. It was a fair demand. He was offering her time to choose, but also asking for commitment once the choice was made. Evelyn respected that. A week, she agreed. I'll give you an answer in a week. That's all I'm asking. The week that followed was the hardest work Evelyn had ever done. She woke before dawn each morning, learned to build up the stove fire while Lucas tended the stock. She burned more bacon, ruined more biscuits, but slowly, incrementally, got better. Lucas taught her to read the stove's heat, to time things properly, to adjust when something went wrong. Cooking's just problem solving, he said after she salvaged a near disaster with the midday beans. Something goes wrong, you figure out how to fix it. You're good at that. She learned to gather eggs from chickens that pecked her hands and squawked indignantly. She learned to haul water from the well, heavy buckets that made her arms shake. She learned to wash clothes in a big tub with a washboard, her knuckles going raw from the cold water and harsh soap. Lucas worked alongside her when he could, but most days he was out on the ranch, mending fence, checking cattle, chopping firewood against the coming winter. She saw how relentless the work was, how it never truly ended. Even when he came in exhausted at evening, there were accounts to check, equipment to repair, plans to make for the next day. But she also saw how he moved through it all with quiet competence. Nothing seemed to rattle him. When a fence broke and cattle got into the neighbor's land, he simply rode over, apologized to Tom Crawford, and spent a day fixing it properly. When a horse threw a shoe, he calmly reshot it himself. When a winter storm rolled through on the 4th day and dumped 6 inches of snow, he just bundled up and went out to make sure the cattle were safe. On the 5th evening, Evelyn stood at the window watching snow fall. The valley was white, beautiful and hostile. Lucas came to stand beside her. "This is nothing," he said quietly. "January, February. That's when real winter hits. Snow up to your waist, wind that cuts through 3 layers of clothing, days when you can't see the barn from the house. Are you trying to scare me? I'm trying to be honest. If you stay, you'll see winter at its worst. I need you to know what you're signing up for. Evelyn watched the snow fall, thinking about Boston winters, cold but manageable, with coal deliveries and indoor plumbing and neighbors close enough to call for help. This was different. This was survival on the edge of civilization. Tell me the truth, she said. Do you think I can do this? Lucas was quiet for a moment. 2 weeks ago, I'd have said no. City woman, no experience, coming west out of desperation. I thought you'd last maybe 3 days before asking for that return ticket. And now? Now I think you're stronger than you know. You don't quit. You get frustrated, sure. You burned breakfast this morning, and I heard you cussing in the kitchen. You heard that? But you didn't give up. You made more biscuits. They were good, by the way. You're learning, Evelyn, fast, and you're not afraid of hard work. He paused. So yes, I think you can do this. The question is whether you want to. Did she want to? That was the real question, wasn't it? Not whether she could survive, but whether she wanted this life. She thought about Boston, the empty house, the closed doors, the future that had narrowed to nothing. That life was gone, irrevocably lost. She could go back east, but to what? She had no money, no family, no prospects. She could find work as a seamstress or laundress, live in a boarding house, scrape by on poverty wages until age or illness destroyed her. Or she could stay here. Build something new with a man who was honest, if not romantic, hardworking, if not wealthy. A man who offered partnership and respect and the dignity of shared purpose. It wasn't the life she'd imagined, but maybe that was good. The life she'd imagined had been built on her father's prosperity, her family's standing, all the comfortable illusions that had shattered when reality intruded. This life was real, hard and honest and real. I want to see the marriage contract, she said suddenly, before I decide. I want to know exactly what I'm agreeing to. Lucas nodded. Fair enough. I'll ride to town tomorrow, get the papers from the Justice of the Peace. You can review them, ask any questions. I won't trick you into anything, Evelyn. The next morning, he left for town while she stayed at the ranch with Jim and Caleb. It felt strange being there without Lucas, as if the house was less solid without his presence. She threw herself into work to distract herself, scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing, organizing shelves that were already organized. You all right, ma'am? Jim asked when he came in for midday dinner and found her attacking the kitchen with unnecessary vigor. Fine. Just restless. Jim poured himself coffee, watching her with a thoughtful expression. Finally, he spoke. Boss is a good man. Fairest I've ever worked for. Pays on time, treats us right, doesn't ask more than he's willing to do himself. Evelyn stopped scrubbing. Why are you telling me this? Because I've seen him since Miss Sarah died. Watched him work himself half to death trying to outrun grief. This last year, he's been different, quieter, more alone. Jim set down his cup. You staying here? That's the first thing I've seen give him hope in a long time. Just thought you should know that. After Jim left, Evelyn sat at the table, his words echoing in her mind. She'd been so focused on her own fears, her own uncertainty, that she hadn't fully considered Lucas's vulnerability. He was risking something too, opening his life to a stranger, hoping she wouldn't leave him more alone than before. Lucas returned at evening with the papers. They sat at the table and he walked her through them by lamplight. The contract was surprisingly simple. It specified joint ownership of all assets acquired during the marriage, equal, say, in ranch decisions, and her right to a settlement if he died before her. There was even a clause about children. Any children of the marriage would inherit equally, regardless of gender. Sarah insisted on that last part, Lucas said. Her father had 5 daughters and 1 son, left everything to the boy. She never forgave him for it. Evelyn read through the papers twice, looking for traps or tricks. She found none. It was fair, almost generous. This gives me more rights than most wives have. That's intentional. Partnership means equal stake. He paused. There's one more thing. He pulled out a small leather pouch and emptied it on the table. Cash. more than she'd expected. $200, he said. Your escape money. If you marry me and then decide you need to leave, for whatever reason, this is yours. Enough to get east and start over. Evelyn stared at the money. You'd give me this even after we're married? Yes, I told you I won't trap you. I meant it. This money stays yours, hidden wherever you want to keep it. I won't touch it, won't ask about it. It's your security. She looked up at him, this man who was offering her not just a home, but dignity, not just marriage, but freedom within it, who understood that true partnership required choice, ongoing and real. Why? She asked quietly. Why are you being so fair? Lucas was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion, carefully controlled. Because Sarah didn't have a choice at the end. She was dying, and there was nothing she could do about it, nothing I could do. I couldn't give her more time, couldn't save our daughter, couldn't do a damn thing except watch them both slip away. He met Evelyn's eyes. I can't control death, but I can control this. I can make sure any woman who shares my life has real choices, real freedom. That matters to me, too. Evelyn felt something crack open in her chest. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of something deeper than attraction. Respect, trust, the foundation on which real partnership could be built. Ask me, she said. Lucas looked confused. Ask you what? To marry you, properly. Not as a business arrangement or practical necessity. Ask me like you mean it. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He stood slowly, then, surprising her, knelt beside her chair. His hand found hers, rough calluses against her soft skin. Evelyn Hart, he said quietly, will you marry me? Will you be my partner, share this ranch and this life, build something real with me? I can't promise it'll be easy. I can't promise romance or wealth or comfort, but I can promise honesty, respect, and my best effort every single day. Will you take that risk with me? Evelyn looked down at him, this hard-working, honest man who'd carved a life from empty prairie and was offering to share it with her, who'd loved deeply and lost everything and was brave enough to try again, even if the trying looked different this time. She thought about the week just past, the burned biscuits and aching muscles and bone-deep exhaustion, the satisfaction of mastering the stove, gathering eggs successfully, helping build something functional and real. The evenings by the fire, comfortable silence, the beginning of genuine companionship. She thought about the return ticket in her trunk, the escape route Lucas had given her without hesitation, and she thought about the future spreading ahead, unknown and challenging, but hers to shape, not inherited from her father, not dictated by Boston society, but chosen deliberately with eyes wide open. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. Lucas's face transformed, not quite a smile, but something close, relief and hope and cautious joy all mixed together. He squeezed her hand gently. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. She laughed softly. Why wait? No reason I can think of. They rode to town the next morning, Evelyn on Daisy, Lucas on his big gray gelding. The November sky was clear and cold, the air sharp in their lungs. At the edge of town, Lucas looked over at her. You sure? I'm sure. No second thoughts? Plenty of second thoughts. I'm doing it anyway. That earned her his first real smile, quick and genuine, transforming his weathered face into something younger, almost boyish. The justice of the peace was a practical man who asked no questions beyond the legal requirements. Jim and Caleb stood as witnesses, both of them cleaned up and looking pleased. The ceremony took 5 minutes, vows spoken plainly, hands clasped firmly, a simple gold band that had been Sarah's slipped onto Evelyn's finger. You may kiss your bride, the justice said. Lucas looked at Evelyn, silently asking permission. She nodded slightly. He leaned in and kissed her, brief, respectful, his lips warm against hers. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't meant to be. It was a promise, sealed and witnessed. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Reed. They signed the papers. Lucas paid the fee, and just like that, Evelyn Hart became Evelyn Reed, wife to a Montana rancher, partner in a life she'd chosen with clear eyes and deliberate will. They had dinner at the hotel, a celebration that felt strange and wonderful. Jim and Caleb toasted them with coffee, having declined whiskey out of respect for Lucas's abstinence. The hotel owner's wife brought out a small cake she'd made when she heard about the wedding. "Welcome to Montana, Mrs. Reed," she said warmly. "It's good to see Lucas settling down again. He's been alone too long." Riding back to the ranch in the afternoon light, Evelyn felt the weight of the gold band on her finger. Married. She was married to the silent man riding beside her, heading toward a house that was now legally hers, a life that would demand everything she had. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt calm, resolved, ready. Lucas glanced over at her. "What are you thinking?" "That I just made the most important decision of my life." "Regrets?" "Ask me in a year." He smiled at that, a real smile this time, easy and genuine. "Fair enough." They reached the ranch as the sun touched the western horizon, painting the valley gold and amber. Lucas helped her down from the horse, his hand steady on her waist. They stood there for a moment, husband and wife, looking at the house that would be their home. "Welcome home, Evelyn Reed," Lucas said quietly. Home. The word settled into her chest, foreign but not unwelcome. She'd come west looking for survival and found something more. The possibility of purpose, partnership, perhaps even belonging. It wasn't what she'd expected, but it was real, honest, hers. And that, Evelyn thought as she walked into her new home with her new husband beside her, might be enough to build a life on after all. That first night as husband and wife, they moved around each other with careful formality. Lucas showed Evelyn to her room, still her room, separate and private as promised, and bid her goodnight with the same respectful distance he'd maintained all week. She lay awake listening to the house settle, the wind outside, the unfamiliar sounds of her new life. The gold band on her finger felt heavy, significant. She was married. Bound to this place, this man, this future she'd chosen with more courage than certainty. In the morning, nothing had changed and everything had changed. Lucas still woke before dawn, still built the fire and started coffee. But when Evelyn emerged from her room, he looked at her differently, not as a guest he was evaluating, but as a partner whose presence was permanent. "Morning, wife," he said quietly, testing the word. "Morning, husband." It felt strange on her tongue, but not wrong. They fell into a rhythm over the following weeks. Evelyn took over the kitchen completely, her skills improving through sheer necessity and repetition. Lucas stopped supervising and started trusting, eating what she cooked without comment unless it was genuinely good. Then he'd nod once and say, "Fine meal." High praise from a man who used words sparingly. She learned the rhythms of ranch life through the changing weather. November gave way to December and winter arrived in earnest. Snow fell heavy and frequent, transforming the valley into something beautiful and treacherous. Temperatures dropped until water froze in the basin overnight, until her breath steamed even inside the house if the fire burned low. Lucas taught her winter survival, how to dress in layers, how to recognize frostbite, how to navigate in whiteout conditions if she absolutely had to. He showed her where the emergency supplies were kept, the rope strung between house and barn for blizzard days when visibility dropped to nothing. "If you get caught out in a storm, follow this rope," he said, his hand firm on the thick hemp. "Don't let go. Don't try to take shortcuts. The rope always leads home." She learned to read weather in the sky, the way Lucas did. Certain cloud formations meant snow within hours. Particular winds meant temperature drops. The behavior of animals predicted storms before they arrived. It was knowledge born of necessity, the kind of understanding you developed when your survival depended on it. The isolation settled over her like a physical weight. Some days she didn't see another soul except Lucas, Jim, and Caleb. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, town was 6 miles, and winter roads made even those distances feel insurmountable. She'd gone from Boston's crowded streets to a world where she could stand outside and see no other human habitation, no smoke from other chimneys, nothing but empty land stretching to distant mountains. It should have been unbearable. Instead, she found it oddly freeing. No one was watching her, judging her, measuring her against society's expectations. She could burn biscuits and no one cared except the people eating them. She could wear the same dress 3 days running because it was practical. She could speak her mind without worrying about propriety. You're quieter than I expected, Lucas observed one evening as they sat by the fire. Based on your letters, I thought you'd talk more. Evelyn looked up from the shirt she was mending, one of his, torn during fence work. I'm not used to having anyone to talk to. In Boston, toward the end, I spent days alone in that empty house. The silence became comfortable. You can talk if you want. I don't mind. What would you like to talk about? Lucas considered this seriously. Don't know. Whatever's on your mind. So she told him about Boston, not the tragedy of her father's death, but earlier memories. Her mother teaching her piano, her father taking her to the harbor to watch ships come in, walking through Public Garden in autumn. Small, bright moments from a life that felt increasingly distant. Lucas listened without interrupting, his attention complete even though his hand stayed busy oiling a piece of tack. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Sounds like you had good parents. Before things went wrong. I did. My father made mistakes, but he loved me. My mother she was the best person I've ever known. Sarah's mother was like that. When Sarah died, her mother came to help with the burial. She told me, "You'll think the grief will kill you, but it won't. You'll wake up one day and realize you're still here, still living. That's when you decide what kind of life you're going to have." Lucas set down the tack. Took me 3 years to understand what she meant. And now? Now I'm deciding. This, he gestured between them. This is me deciding to have a life again. Different from before, but still good. Evelyn felt the weight of that trust, the vulnerability it took for him to let her into the space Sarah had left. I'll try to be worthy of that decision. You already are. Christmas approached, and Evelyn felt its absence keenly. In Boston, there would have been parties, church services, elaborate meals, gifts exchanged with careful ceremony. Here, there was just work. Cattle still needed tending, chickens still needed feeding, snow still needed shoveling. But on Christmas Eve, Lucas surprised her. She came in from gathering eggs to find him pulling something from behind the woodpile, a small pine tree, freshly cut, its needles still fragrant. Thought we should mark the day, he said, almost shyly. Jim helped me find one yesterday. They set it up in the corner, and Evelyn dug through her trunk for ribbon, creating simple decorations. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs. That evening, Lucas gave her a gift wrapped in brown paper, a new winter coat he'd commissioned from the seamstress in town, lined with wool and cut for riding. You'll need it, he said. Your Boston cloak isn't warm enough for January. She had nothing for him, hadn't known they were exchanging gifts, hadn't had money to buy anything anyway. But she'd been working on something in secret, and she retrieved it now from her room. A shirt she'd made from fabric she'd found in the sewing basket, cut to his measurements, stitched carefully by lamplight after he'd gone to bed. Lucas unfolded it slowly, his rough hands careful with the fabric. You made this. It's not perfect. The collar's a bit crooked and the stitching isn't professional, but it's perfect. He looked at her with something like wonder. Thank you, Evelyn. They shared a simple Christmas dinner, roasted chicken, potatoes, dried apple pie she'd managed not to burn, and afterward sat by the fire in comfortable quiet. Evelyn found herself thinking that this was enough. This simple evening with a man who appreciated a handmade shirt more than any expensive gift. This life built on small, honest gestures. New Year came cold and clear. Lucas took her to the Crawfords for a gathering, the first time she'd socialized since the wedding. Martha Crawford was a sturdy woman in her 40s, weathered by ranch life, but warm and welcoming. So you're the one who finally got Lucas to settle down again, she said, embracing Evelyn like an old friend. About time. Man was turning into a hermit. The Crawford children, ranging from 16 down to 8, treated Evelyn with open curiosity. They'd clearly heard about the Boston lady who'd come west to marry the quiet rancher, and they peppered her with questions about the city until Martha shooed them away. Don't mind them. They're starved for new faces out here. We all are. Evelyn relaxed into the warmth of company, realizing how much she'd missed simple human connection. Martha was easy to talk to, practical and funny, with none of Boston's social pretensions. They talked about preserving vegetables, managing chickens in winter, the challenges of cooking on a temperamental stove. You're doing better than I did my first year, Martha confided. I burned everything. Tom lost 20 pounds before I figured out how to regulate that beast of a stove. Tom Crawford, a bear of a man with a booming laugh, clapped Lucas on the shoulder. Marriage suits you. You look less grim. Didn't realize I looked grim before. Like death on horseback, my friend. Like death on horseback. On the ride home, Lucas was more talkative than usual, the evening socializing having loosened something in him. Martha likes you. That's good. She doesn't like everyone. She seems wonderful, practical. She and Tom have been here 15 years, raised those kids in country that's killed more than one family. They're survivors. He paused. She could teach you things I can't. Women's knowledge. If you wanted to ride over sometimes, I think she'd welcome it. Evelyn felt a small bloom of hope, friendship, the possibility of connection beyond the ranch's boundaries. I'd like that. January arrived with brutal cold. Temperatures dropped so low that Lucas brought the chickens into the barn to keep them from freezing. Snow fell until it was waist-deep in places, until the world shrank to just the ranch buildings and the white expanse surrounding them. They spent days trapped inside by blizzards, the wind howling like a living thing, snow driving horizontal. Lucas had been right. There were times when you couldn't see the barn from the house. During the worst storms, he'd rope himself before going out to tend stock, and Evelyn would stand at the window watching his dark shape disappear into white chaos, her heart in her throat until he returned. "This is winter," he said during one storm, stamping snow from his boots. His face was raw with cold, ice crystals in his beard. "This is what you signed up for." She handed him coffee, helped him out of his frozen coat. "I'm still here." "Yes, you are." Something like pride flickered in his eyes. "Yes, you are." The isolation pressed harder during those long winter weeks. Days when she spoke to no one but Lucas, when the world beyond the frosted windows felt unreal, when Boston seemed like something she'd dreamed rather than lived. She found herself talking to the chickens as she fed them, grateful for any living thing that acknowledged her presence. But there were good moments, too. Evenings when Lucas would read aloud from books they'd borrowed from the Crawfords, adventure stories, poetry, once a technical manual on cattle breeding that put them both to sleep. Times when they'd work side by side in companionable silence, his presence steady and reassuring. Moments when she'd catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not love, not yet, but something warmer than mere partnership. In February, the first real test came. Lucas woke her in the dark before dawn, his hand gentle on her shoulder, but his voice urgent. "Evelyn, I need your help." She was instantly alert, fear spiking through her. "What's wrong?" "One of the cows is calving wrong. I need an extra pair of hands." "Can you do it?" She'd never helped with animal birth, had never even seen it, but his face was grim with worry, and there was no one else. "Tell me what to do." They went to the barn through bitter cold, stars brilliant overhead. Inside, a cow lay on her side, bellowing in distress. Lucas had already examined her, and his face was tight with concern. "Calf's turned wrong. I need to reach in and straighten it, but I need you to hold her head, keep her calm. Can you do that?" Evelyn knelt in the straw beside the cow's massive head, her hands trembling. The cow's eye rolled white with pain and fear. Lucas was at the other end, sleeves rolled up, hands already bloody. "Talk to her," he said. Calm voice. "Let her know she's safe." So Evelyn talked. Nonsense, mostly. Soothing sounds, gentle words, stories from Boston that made no sense but carried the rhythm of comfort. She stroked the cow's neck, felt the massive animal's muscles trembling with effort and pain. Lucas worked with intense concentration, his face set in lines of fierce focus. Minutes stretched into eternity. The cow bellowed, thrashing. Evelyn held on, muscles screaming, talking, until her voice went hoarse. "Almost there," Lucas muttered. "Come on, sweetheart. Work with me." "There. Got it." The calf came in a rush of fluid and blood. Lucas caught it, laid it in the straw, cleared its nose and mouth. For a terrible moment, it lay still. Then it shuddered and took its first breath. "She's alive," Lucas said, and his voice cracked with relief. "She's alive." The mother cow struggled to her feet, instinct overriding exhaustion. She began licking her calf with long, rough strokes. The calf, spindly and wet and impossibly fragile, tried to stand on shaking legs. Lucas sat back in the straw, breathing hard, his arms bloody to the elbows. Evelyn knelt beside him, equally exhausted, and they watched the calf finally gain its feet and wobble toward its mother. "First one of the season," Lucas said quietly. "Good sign. If we can save the difficult births, we'll have a good year." Evelyn looked at him. This man who'd just spent an hour fighting to save an animal's life with the same intensity most men reserved for their own families. Who knew ranching not as business, but as stewardship, every creature under his care worth fighting for? "You were amazing," she said. "We were amazing. Couldn't have done it without you." They walked back to the house as dawn broke over the mountains, painting the snow gold and pink. Evelyn felt something shift inside her, a barrier lowering, a wall coming down. This man beside her, silent and steady and utterly competent, was her husband, her partner. And somewhere in the last 3 months, he'd become something more. Not love. Not yet. But the soil where love could grow, carefully tended through shared work and honest dealing and moments like this, kneeling in straw covered in blood, fighting together to bring life into a harsh world. Inside, Lucas washed up while she made coffee. They sat at their table as morning light filled the kitchen, both too keyed up to sleep despite their exhaustion. "Thank you," Lucas said finally, "for not hesitating, for trusting me." "Of course I trust you." He looked at her seriously. "Do you? Really?" Evelyn thought about it. Not the easy answer, but the true one. 3 months ago, she'd married a stranger out of necessity. Now she sat across from a man she'd watched work himself to exhaustion every day, who'd never been unkind, who'd kept every promise he'd made, who'd given her space to learn at her own pace, who'd never pressured her, who'd treated her with more respect than most men showed their own wives. "Yes," she said, "I really do." Lucas's face transformed, just for a moment, his guard dropping completely, revealing vulnerability and hope, and something that looked dangerously like affection. Then he recovered, nodding once. "Good. That's good." But something had changed between them. They both felt it. March brought the first hints of spring, longer days, slightly warmer temperatures, snow beginning to melt in the valleys. The ranch came alive with work. Calving season hit in earnest, and there were nights when Lucas barely slept, checking on expectant cows, helping with difficult births. Evelyn helped when she could, learning to recognize the signs of trouble, growing less squeamish about blood and birth fluids and the messy reality of bringing life into the world. She also started riding out more, exploring the ranch boundaries with Daisy. Lucas had been right. She was tougher than she'd known. The work had hardened her, built muscle and calluses, given her a physical strength she'd never possessed in Boston. She could haul water without her arms shaking, could chop kindling without blistering, could ride for hours without soreness. One afternoon, she rode to the ridge where Lucas had first shown her the ranch. She sat on Daisy's back looking down at the valley. The house and barn and corrals, smoke rising from the chimney, cattle dotting the brown grass. Her home. The word felt real now, grounded in sweat and effort, and 4 months of choosing this life every single day. Movement caught her eye. Lucas riding in from the north pasture, Jim beside him. Even from this distance, she recognized the set of his shoulders, the way he sat his horse. Her husband. When had she started thinking of him that way without the small jolt of surprise? That evening, she made his favorite meal, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, biscuits that were actually good, dried apple pie. Lucas noticed. "What's the occasion?" "Does there need to be one?" "You made pie. You only make pie for occasions." Evelyn smiled. "Maybe I'm celebrating surviving winter. Maybe I'm celebrating 4 months of marriage. Maybe I just felt like making pie. Or maybe you're buttering me up for something." But he was smiling too, relaxed in a way he rarely was. After dinner, they sat on the porch watching the sun set. The evening was cool but not bitter, the first night mild enough for sitting outside. Spring was coming, bringing with it a season of hard work, but also growth, renewal, the promise of easier days. "I want to plant the garden differently this year," Evelyn said. "I've been studying Sarah's notes, and I think we could expand the potato section, add more beans. Martha said she'd give me starter plants for tomatoes." Lucas glanced at her. Sarah's garden is yours now. Plant it however you want. I want it to be good, to produce enough that we're not running short by February. It will be. You're methodical. You'll figure it out. He paused. You're good at this, Evelyn, the ranch work, being a partner. You're better at it than I thought possible. Is that a compliment? It's a fact, but yes, it's also a compliment. They sat in comfortable silence, and Evelyn felt the rightness of it. This man beside her, this land stretching out in the twilight, this life they were building through countless small choices. It wasn't the marriage she'd imagined, but it was real and solid and good. Lucas? I'm glad I stayed. I'm glad I chose this. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and in the fading light, his expression was unguarded. So am I. April brought the storm. It came without warning, a spring blizzard that caught everyone off guard. One moment the day was clear and mild, the next the sky turned black and snow began falling in thick, heavy flakes. Lucas was out checking the eastern fence line. Jim and Caleb were moving cattle, and Evelyn was alone at the house when the wind began to howl. She'd learned enough to recognize danger. This wasn't normal spring snow. This was a killer storm. She checked the supplies Lucas had taught her about, made sure the fire was built up, hung a lantern in the window to guide anyone trying to find their way home. An hour passed. 2 hours. The storm intensified, visibility dropping to nothing. Evelyn stood at the window, watching white chaos, fear building in her chest. Where was Lucas? He knew this country, knew how to survive, but storms like this killed even experienced ranchers. She paced, unable to settle, made coffee, let it grow cold, made more. The wind hammered at the house, snow piling in drifts against the walls. 3 hours. 4. The fear crystallized into something sharper. He should be back by now. Unless he was hurt. Unless he was lost. Unless he'd taken shelter somewhere and was waiting out the storm. But even thinking that felt like false comfort. She remembered the rope strung between house and barn, grabbed her warmest coat, the one Lucas had given her for Christmas, and wrapped herself in layers, pulled on her gloves, took a breath to steady herself. If Lucas needed help, someone had to go looking, and there was only her. She opened the door into the storm, and the wind nearly knocked her down. Snow drove into her face, stinging like needles. She grabbed the rope with both hands and began pulling herself toward the barn, hand over hand, the world reduced to white noise and the rough hemp under her gloves. The barn was chaos. Jim and Caleb had made it back, both of them frostbitten and exhausted. They stared at her in shock. "Mrs. Reed, you shouldn't be out here." "Where's Lucas?" Their faces told her everything. Jim spoke carefully. "He went to check the eastern line. Should have been back before the storm hit full force, but he knows this land, ma'am. He'll hole up somewhere safe and ride it out." "Or he's hurt? Or lost?" Evelyn fought to keep her voice steady. "We need to look for him." "Can't," Caleb said flatly. "Visibility's 0. We get lost ourselves, and then there'd be 3 people missing instead of 1. Best thing we can do is wait." "I won't just sit in that house while he's out there." "You have to." Jim's voice was kind, but firm. "Boss would skin us alive if we let you go out in this. He'd want you safe, Mrs. Reed. That's what matters to him most." Evelyn wanted to argue, to insist, to do something. But she knew they were right. Going out in this storm was suicide. So she did the only thing she could. She went back to the house, following the rope hand over hand, and began the terrible waiting. She fed the fire until it roared, made coffee and soup that no one would eat, paced the floor until she wore tracks in the dust. Prayed, even though she wasn't sure she believed anymore, because what else could she do? The storm raged for 6 hours. 6 hours of not knowing if Lucas was alive or dead, if she was already a widow, if this marriage she'd built so carefully was about to end before it truly began. And somewhere in those terrible hours, Evelyn realized something that stopped her pacing, that made her sink into a chair with her hands pressed to her mouth. She loved him, not the careful partnership she'd agreed to, not the respectful companionship they'd developed. Real love. The kind that made her stomach twist with fear at the thought of losing him. The kind that made the house feel empty without his presence. The kind that had grown so gradually she hadn't noticed until this moment when she might lose everything. When had it happened? During winter storms, when he'd come in frozen and exhausted but still gentle. During calving season, when she'd watched him fight to save every animal. During quiet evenings, when he'd read aloud and she'd memorized the sound of his voice. During 100 small moments of kindness and respect and honest partnership. It didn't matter when. It mattered that it was real, and that he might die never knowing. The storm began to ease as darkness fell. The wind dropped. The snow lightened. Evelyn stood at the window, straining to see into the twilight. Movement, a dark shape emerging from the white. Horse and rider moving slowly but steadily toward the barn. She was out the door before she thought, running through knee-deep snow without her coat, without gloves, without anything but desperate relief. Lucas was dismounting as she reached the barn, and she threw herself at him hard enough to stagger him. "Hey, Evelyn, I'm all right. You're frozen. You've been gone for hours. I thought—" Her voice broke. Lucas's arms came around her, solid and real. "I'm sorry. I'm all right. Took shelter in the line shack, waited it out. I'm safe." She was crying, she realized, crying into his frozen coat while he held her with his stiff, cold hands. Jim and Caleb were there too, helping with the horse, their expressions carefully neutral. "Let's get inside," Lucas said gently. "You're shaking." In the house, she made him strip off his frozen clothes, wrapped him in blankets, forced hot coffee into him. He submitted to her ministrations with bewildered patience, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Evelyn, I'm fine. It's not the first storm I've weathered." "You could have died, but I didn't." "You could have. And I would have been here, waiting, not knowing." She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Would that have mattered so much? She looked at him. This man she'd married for practical reasons. This partner she'd learned to trust. This husband she'd somehow fallen in love with. And she realized she was done being careful, done protecting herself, done pretending this was only partnership. "Yes," she said simply. "It would have mattered, more than I knew until today." Understanding dawned slowly in his eyes, hope, fragile and uncertain. "Evelyn, I love you." The words came out rushed, almost angry. "I didn't mean to. This was supposed to be practical, sensible, safe. But I love you, Lucas Reed, and when you were out there in that storm, I thought I might lose you before I ever told you." He kissed her. Not the brief, respectful kiss of their wedding. This was real. His cold hands cupping her face, his lips warm despite the chill still in his body. 4 months of careful distance dissolving in an instant. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "I've loved you since you helped me with that first calf," he said roughly. "Maybe before. I didn't say anything because we agreed this was partnership, not romance. I didn't want to pressure you. But God, Evelyn, I love you. Not like I loved Sarah. Different, but just as real. You're my wife, my partner, and the bravest woman I've ever known." She kissed him this time, and it was like coming home, like all the pieces finally fitting together. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I should move my things to your room," he said quietly. "If you want, if you're ready." "I'm ready. I've been ready. I was just waiting for what?" "For this. For honesty. For knowing it was real." Lucas pulled her close, and she felt his heart beating against her chest, steady and strong. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the world white and clean. Inside, something new was beginning, not just partnership, not just respect, but real love, earned through work and waiting and choosing each other day after day. "Welcome home," Lucas whispered into her hair. "My wife. My love. Welcome home." And Evelyn, wrapped in his arms in the house they'd made together, finally understood what home meant. Not a place you inherited or fell into, but something you built with your own hands, your own choices, your own heart given freely to someone who'd earned it through honesty and care. This was home. This man. This life. Chosen deliberately and loved completely. And it was more than enough. It was everything. That night, Lucas moved his belongings into Evelyn's room. Their room now. It took him 3 trips to carry his clothes, his few personal items, the photograph of Sarah and their daughter that he'd kept on his bedside table. He set it on the dresser without comment, and Evelyn understood. The past wasn't erased. It was simply making room for the present. They lay together in the darkness, the unfamiliarity of shared space making them both cautious. Lucas's hand found hers under the quilt, their fingers intertwining. "I'm not good with words," he said quietly. "Never have been. But I need you to know, what I feel for you is real. It's not settling. It's not making do. It's choosing you, every day, because you're extraordinary." Evelyn turned toward him, their faces inches apart in the dark. "You make me braver than I am, stronger than I thought possible. You were always brave. You just needed a place to prove it." They kissed again, slow and exploratory, learning each other without the barriers they'd maintained for months. When Lucas pulled her close, Evelyn felt the tension leave his body, as if he'd been holding himself rigid all this time, waiting for permission to truly hold her. "Are you sure?" he whispered against her hair. "We can wait if you need more time." "I'm sure. I've been sure since the storm." What followed was tender and awkward and real. Two people learning intimacy after months of careful distance, making mistakes and laughing softly, finding their way through patience and care. Afterward, Evelyn lay in Lucas's arms, listening to his heartbeat slow, feeling more settled than she had since leaving Boston. "I never thought I'd have this again," Lucas said into the darkness. "After Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was finished. I was wrong. I never thought I'd have it at all. I expected a marriage of convenience. I got something infinitely better." His arms tightened around her. "Sleep now. Tomorrow there's work." She smiled against his chest. "There's always work." Welcome to ranching. Spring exploded across the valley in the weeks that followed. Snow melted, revealing brown grass that quickly turned green. The creek swelled with runoff, running fast and cold. Birds returned, filling the air with sound after winter's silence. And everywhere, there was life. Calves wobbling on new legs, foals testing their strength, the earth itself seeming to exhale after months of frozen stillness. Evelyn threw herself into the garden with determined energy. She and Martha Crawford had become genuine friends, riding back and forth between ranches to share advice, seeds, and company. Martha taught her about Montana's short growing season, which vegetables thrived in this climate, how to protect tender plants from late frosts. "You'll want to focus on things that store well," Martha explained as they worked the soil together. "Potatoes, carrots, onions, beans. Tomatoes if you can get them to ripen before first frost. Cabbage for sauerkraut. Squash keeps all winter if you store it right." They planted in rows, carefully measured and marked. Evelyn's hands grew dirty and her back ached, but there was deep satisfaction in it, creating something that would feed them through the next winter, literally planting their future in the earth. Lucas watched her work with quiet approval. One evening, he came to the garden and knelt beside her, helping to hill up the potato rows. "You've taken to this," he observed. "I like seeing things grow. There's a logic to it. You do the work, you get results. It's honest. Like you." She glanced at him, saw the warmth in his eyes, and felt her heart squeeze. Even after 6 weeks of shared nights and growing intimacy, little moments like this still surprised her. The casual affection, the easy partnership, the way he'd look at her sometimes as if she were something precious. "Help me finish this section and I'll make that stew you like for dinner." "Deal." They worked side by side as the sun sank toward the mountains, their movements synchronized through practice. When they finished, Lucas pulled her to her feet and kissed her, heedless of the dirt on both of them. "What was that for?" she asked, laughing. "Do I need a reason to kiss my wife?" "I suppose not." "Good. Because I plan to do it often." Life settled into a rhythm that felt both comfortable and exciting. Days were full of work, Lucas managing the ranch while Evelyn handled the house and garden, both of them helping each other as needed. Evenings were theirs, quiet dinners, conversation that came easier now, nights in their shared bed learning each other's bodies and hearts with patient thoroughness. Evelyn found herself thinking less about Boston, about the life she'd lost. That world felt increasingly distant, increasingly irrelevant. This was her life now, rising before dawn to make breakfast, tending chickens in garden, cooking meals for ranch hands who appreciated her efforts, falling into bed exhausted beside a husband who loved her. It wasn't easy. The work was relentless, the isolation real, the challenges constant, but it was deeply satisfying in ways her Boston life had never been. Every meal she cooked, every vegetable she grew, every task she mastered, it all meant something. She was contributing, building, creating a life through her own effort. In June, Martha invited them to a barn dance at the Crawford Ranch. It was a community gathering, ranchers from 20 miles around coming together for rare socializing. Evelyn felt nervous as they rode over, Lucas beside her on his gray gelding. "I don't know anyone," she said. "What if they don't like me?" "They'll love you. You're capable, honest, and you make me happy. That's all that matters to ranch folk." The Crawford barn was transformed, swept clean, decorated with wildflowers, lit by dozens of lanterns. Two men with fiddles were tuning up, and long tables groaned under food that women had brought. Evelyn counted maybe 40 people, more humans in one place than she'd seen since arriving in Montana. Martha greeted them warmly, introducing Evelyn to a stream of neighbors. Mrs. Johnson, who ran the boarding house in town. The Peterson family, who homesteaded to the east. Young Sarah Miller, who was engaged to Tom Crawford's oldest son. The faces and names blurred together, but everyone was genuinely welcoming. "We heard Lucas finally found himself a wife," Mrs. Johnson said, her eyes twinkling. "About time, too. Man was getting too solitary." The dancing started, and Lucas surprised Evelyn by pulling her onto the floor. "I didn't know you could dance. Sarah taught me. I'm not graceful, but I remember the steps." They danced 3 songs together, Lucas's hand firm on her waist, their movements becoming more confident as they relaxed. Then Tom Crawford cut in, and Lucas danced with Martha, and Evelyn found herself passed among the men, all of them respectful, curious about the woman who'd tamed their quiet neighbor. Later, sitting on a hay bale catching her breath, Evelyn watched Lucas across the barn. He was talking with a group of ranchers, gesturing with his hands, clearly explaining something about cattle breeding. He looked lighter than she'd ever seen him, relaxed, almost carefree. This was his community. These were his people. And now they were hers, too. Martha sat beside her, handing her a cup of punch. "You look happy." "I am. It's strange. 6 months ago I was in Boston thinking my life was over. Now I'm here, and I can't imagine being anywhere else." That's how it happens. The land gets into your blood. The work becomes part of who you are. And if you're lucky, Martha nodded toward Lucas, you find someone to share it with. I'm very lucky. So is he. They rode home in the late evening, the sky still holding light at this latitude and season. Evelyn felt pleasantly tired, full of good food and better company. Lucas was humming something, one of the dance tunes, and she realized with a start that she'd never heard him hum before. "You had a good time," she observed. "I did. It's been too long since I went to a gathering. I forgot how good it feels." "We should go more often." "We will." He reached over and squeezed her hand. "I stopped going after Sarah died. Couldn't bear the sympathy, the careful way people talked around her loss. But tonight was different. They see us as a couple now, Lucas and Evelyn Reed, not Lucas the widower. Does that feel good or strange?" "Both, mostly good." He was quiet for a moment. "Sarah would have liked you. She'd have approved of how you've taken to ranch life. She always said it took a special kind of woman to thrive out here, and not everyone could do it." It was the first time he'd mentioned Sarah without pain shadowing his voice. Progress, Evelyn thought. Healing. July brought the first real heat. The garden exploded with growth, potato plants bushing out, beans climbing their poles, squash spreading wide leaves. Evelyn tended it daily, amazed by how quickly things grew in Montana's intense summer sun. She also learned to preserve food, working alongside Martha to can beans and pickles, smoke meat, dry herbs. It was during this work that Evelyn first felt the nausea. She was in the kitchen making jam when her stomach suddenly revolted. She barely made it outside before losing her breakfast. The second morning it happened, she dismissed it as bad food. The third morning, standing bent over behind the house, she realized what it might mean. She was late, nearly 2 weeks late, and her courses were usually reliable. Fear and excitement warred in her chest. A baby. She might be carrying Lucas's child. She told no one, waiting to be certain. But her body confirmed it over the following weeks. The persistent nausea, the exhaustion that hit her in waves, her breast tender and swollen. She was pregnant. 6 months of marriage, and she was going to have a baby. The joy was immediate and overwhelming. But so was the fear. She thought of Sarah dying in childbirth, of the tiny daughter who'd lived only minutes, of all the ways pregnancy could go wrong on an isolated ranch with the nearest doctor 6 miles away. She should tell Lucas. She needed to tell him. But every time she tried, fear closed her throat. What if telling him made it real? What if acknowledging it somehow invited disaster? 2 weeks passed before Martha noticed. They were canning tomatoes together, and Evelyn had to run outside 3 times to be sick. When she came back the 3rd time, pale and shaking, Martha looked at her knowingly. How far along? Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Maybe 2 months. I'm not sure. Martha came around the table and hugged her firmly. Does Lucas know? No, I'm afraid to tell him, after what happened with Sarah. That's exactly why you need to tell him. Keeping secrets won't protect either of you. Martha held her at arm's length. Listen to me. Childbirth is dangerous. Yes, women die, babies die, but most of us survive. I've had 4 healthy children, and I'm not special. Your body knows what to do. What if mine doesn't? Then we'll get help. There's a midwife in town, Mrs. Chen, delivered 3 of mine. She's good. And I'll be there. You won't be alone. Martha's expression softened. But you have to tell Lucas. He deserves to know, and he deserves to go through this with you, not be shut out by your fear. Evelyn knew she was right. That evening, after dinner, she asked Lucas to walk with her. They went to the creek, the water running low and lazy in the summer heat. She sat on their favorite rock, and Lucas settled beside her, clearly sensing something was wrong. What is it? She took his hand, pressed it against her still flat stomach. I'm pregnant. About 2 months along, I think. Lucas went completely still, his face drained of color. For a terrible moment, she thought he might be sick. Lucas? Say something. Are you sure? Yes. He pulled his hand back as if burned, stood up, walked a few paces away. His shoulders were rigid, his breathing harsh. Evelyn watched, her heart sinking. I can see the midwife, she said quietly. Martha says she's good, and Martha will help. No. The word came out strangled. No, you don't understand. Sarah saw the midwife. Martha was there. And they both died anyway. Lucas, he turned to face her, and the naked fear in his eyes made her chest ache. I can't do this again. I can't watch you suffer. I can't lose you. You won't lose me. You don't know that. Sarah thought she'd be fine. The midwife thought everything was normal, and then she started bleeding, and there was nothing anyone could do. She died in our bed, Evelyn. She died, and I couldn't save her. Evelyn stood and went to him, taking his face in her hands. I'm not Sarah. That doesn't matter. Childbirth kills women, strong women, healthy women. It could kill you. It could, but it probably won't. Most women survive, Lucas. Most babies live. We have to believe that. I don't know if I can. His voice broke. I love you too much. If I lost you, you won't. I'm strong. I've survived everything else Montana has thrown at me. I can survive this too. But she could see the terror in his eyes, the wound being ripped open. She'd known this would be hard for him, but she hadn't anticipated this level of fear. He was genuinely terrified, and she didn't know how to comfort him. That night, Lucas barely touched her. He lay on his side of the bed, rigid and wakeful. Evelyn could hear him breathing, too fast and shallow, fear keeping him from rest. Talk to me, she said softly. I don't know what to say. Tell me about Sarah, about what happened. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, haltingly, he began to speak. He told her about Sarah's pregnancy, healthy and normal for 8 months, about the joy they'd felt preparing for their daughter, about how everything changed in a single afternoon when Sarah started bleeding. The midwife came immediately. She did everything she could, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. Sarah knew. She knew she was dying. She made me promise to take care of our daughter, to name her Emma like we'd planned. Then she just slipped away. And Emma followed her 10 minutes later. I held my daughter for 10 minutes before she died in my arms. Evelyn was crying, tears running silent down her face. I'm so sorry. I couldn't save them. I'm good at fixing things, solving problems, but I couldn't fix that. I was useless. You weren't useless. You were there. You loved them. And now I have to do it again. Watch you grow big with our child, knowing every day that it could kill you, knowing I'll be just as useless if something goes wrong. Evelyn moved closer, pressing herself against his back, her arms around him. You won't be useless. You'll be my husband, my partner. That's what I need. Not someone to fix everything, just someone to be with me. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You are. You're the strongest man I know. But she felt his body shaking with silent sobs, and she understood the depth of his trauma. This wasn't just fear. It was grief reawakened, terror that history would repeat itself. The following weeks were difficult. Lucas became obsessively protective, barely letting Evelyn do any physical work. When she tried to carry water, he took the bucket from her hands. When she worked in the garden, he appeared to do the heavy digging. When she suggested riding to visit Martha, he looked so stricken she immediately dropped the idea. I can't lose you, he said repeatedly. I can't go through that again. You're smothering me, Lucas. I'm pregnant, not dying. Sarah was pregnant too. The argument became their constant undercurrent. Evelyn understood his fear, but she refused to be treated like glass. She'd spent 6 months proving her strength, and she wouldn't surrender it now. One morning in August, she woke to find Lucas already up, sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. She sat beside him, waiting. I'm sorry, he said finally. I know I'm being impossible. Every time I look at you, I see Sarah. I see what's coming. What's coming is a baby. Our baby, Lucas. A child we made together. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Of course it does. But the joy is buried under the terror. Evelyn took his hand. I need you to believe I'll survive this. If you can't believe it, I don't know how I can. I'm trying. Try harder. Because I'm not going to spend the next 6 months being treated like I'm already dying. I'm alive, Lucas. I'm healthy and strong. And I intend to stay that way. Something in her voice got through to him. He looked at her, really looked, and seemed to see past his fear for the first time in weeks. You're right. I'm sorry. I'll do better. Promise me. Promise you'll see this pregnancy as hope, not doom. I promise I'll try. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Lucas made an effort to relax his vigilance, to let Evelyn maintain some autonomy. He still worried. She could see it in the way he watched her, the careful way he touched her growing belly, but he stopped trying to wrap her in cotton wool. In September, they went to town to meet with Mrs. Chen, the midwife. She was a small, capable woman in her 50s who'd been delivering babies in Montana for 20 years. She examined Evelyn thoroughly, asked detailed questions, and finally pronounced everything normal. Strong heartbeat, good position, healthy mother. I see no reason this shouldn't be a perfectly routine birth. Lucas, sitting rigid in the corner, spoke up. My first wife died in childbirth. The baby too. Mrs. Chen turned to him with compassionate but firm eyes. I know. I was the midwife. And I've thought about that birth every day since. But sometimes things go wrong that no one can predict or prevent. Your wife had a placental abruption. Random, unpreventable, almost always fatal. Could it happen to Evelyn? It could happen to any pregnant woman, but it's rare, and dwelling on worst-case scenarios won't help anyone. She looked at Evelyn. You're healthy. You're strong. Your body is doing exactly what it should. Trust it. On the ride home, Lucas was quiet. Finally, he spoke. I want to believe her. Then believe her. Believe me. Believe in this. Evelyn placed his hand on her belly, where their child was growing. This is our future, Lucas, not our tragedy. That night, as they lay in bed, Lucas rested his hand on her stomach and felt their baby move for the first time. A flutter, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. Did you feel that? Evelyn whispered. Yes. His voice was thick with emotion. That's our baby. Our baby, alive and growing, a miracle, not a curse. Lucas pulled her close, his hand staying on her belly, feeling for more movement. I'll try to see it that way. I'll try to find the joy instead of the fear. That's all I ask. Fall arrived, bringing crisp mornings and the frantic work of preparing for winter. Evelyn's belly grew round and obvious. Martha came over weekly to check on her, bringing advice and reassurance. The Crawford children made gifts for the baby, a carved rattle, tiny knitted booties, a soft blanket. Lucas built a cradle in his workshop, the wood smooth and perfect, carved with simple but beautiful designs. He set it beside their bed without comment, but Evelyn understood. He was trying to believe, trying to prepare for joy instead of grief. In October, as the first snow fell, Evelyn stood at the window watching the valley turn white. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling their child move inside her. Strong kicks now, active and real. She was 7 months along, entering the final stretch. Lucas came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her, his hands covering hers on her belly. "Are you scared?" he asked quietly. "Yes, but I'm also excited. We're going to have a baby, Lucas. A child to raise together, to teach, to love. Isn't that worth being scared for?" "It is." He rested his chin on her shoulder. "I'm going to be a father again." "Yeah, you're going to be a wonderful father." "I hope so. I hope I get the chance." "You will. We both will." They stood together as snow fell over their ranch, over their home, over the life they'd built through work and honesty and love earned day by day. Outside, winter was coming. Inside, new life was growing. And somewhere between fear and hope, they found the courage to believe in their future. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Partners, lovers, parents. The family they were becoming, one brave choice at a time. November brought bitter cold and the constant awareness that their baby could arrive any day. Evelyn moved through the house with deliberate care, her body heavy and awkward, her back aching constantly. Lucas watched her with barely concealed anxiety, his fear a living thing between them despite his best efforts to hide it. Martha came to stay the last week of November, insisting that Evelyn needed another woman present as her time approached. She brought practical comfort, helping with cooking and cleaning, talking Evelyn through what to expect, sharing stories of her own births that were equal parts reassuring and terrifying. "The pain is like nothing else," Martha said frankly as they folded tiny clothes Evelyn had sewn. "But it ends, and when you hold your baby, you forget everything except that moment." "What if something goes wrong?" Evelyn asked quietly, voicing the fear she tried to keep from Lucas. "Then we deal with it. But worrying won't prevent it, so we might as well believe everything will be fine." Martha squeezed her hand. "You're strong, Evelyn. Your body knows what to do. Trust it." Lucas threw himself into work with manic intensity, as if keeping busy could hold back the inevitable. He checked and rechecked supplies, made sure the house was stocked with firewood, kept the path to the barn clear of snow. At night he held Evelyn carefully, as if she might shatter. "I can feel your heart racing," she said one night, pressing her hand to his chest. "I can't stop thinking about it. About what happened to Sarah. About losing you the same way. About being helpless again." Evelyn turned in his arms, awkward with her belly between them. "Lucas, look at me. I am not Sarah. This is not the same pregnancy. You have to separate them in your mind or the fear will destroy us both." "I know. I'm trying. Try harder, because I need you strong when my time comes. I need you believing I'll survive, not preparing for my death." His arms tightened around her. "I don't know how to do that." "You do it the same way you do everything else. One day at a time, one moment at a time. You choose hope instead of fear." "What if hope isn't enough?" "Then we'll face whatever comes together, but we start with hope." The contractions began on a clear December morning, 3 days after the first real blizzard of the season. Evelyn woke to a tightening across her belly, rhythmic and insistent. She lay still, timing them mentally, not wanting to wake Lucas until she was certain. After an hour, she knew. This was it. "Lucas?" She shook his shoulder gently. "It's time." He was awake instantly, fear flashing across his face before he controlled it. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. The contractions are regular, about 10 minutes apart." He was out of bed immediately, pulling on clothes with shaking hands. "I'll get Martha. I'll send Jim to town for Mrs. Chen." "Lucas?" She caught his hand. "Breathe. We have time. First babies take hours. But his face was white, his breathing rapid. She could see him slipping into panic, into the memories that haunted him. She pulled him down to sit beside her on the bed. Listen to me. I am going to be fine. Our baby is going to be fine. You need to believe that. I'm trying. Then stop trying and just do it. I need you here, present, not lost in the past. He took a shuddering breath, then another. Slowly, the color returned to his face. You're right. I'm sorry. What do you need? I need you to get Martha and send for Mrs. Chen. Then I need you to come back and be with me. I can do that. He kissed her forehead and left. Evelyn heard him moving through the house, then his boots on the porch, his voice calling for Jim. Another contraction hit, and she breathed through it, remembering Martha's advice. Don't fight the pain, breathe into it. Your body knows what to do. Martha arrived within minutes, calm and efficient. She helped Evelyn into a clean nightgown, got her settled in bed, and began timing contractions. Lucas hovered in the doorway, uncertain. Come in or go out, Martha said firmly. But stop lurking. You're making everyone nervous. Lucas came in, pulled a chair to the bedside, and took Evelyn's hand. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. The morning passed in a haze of increasing pain. Contractions came closer together, harder, demanding her complete attention. Between them, she rested, drank water Martha offered, tried to conserve strength for what was coming. Lucas stayed beside her, his hand gripping hers through each contraction, his face tight with worry. She could feel him flinching every time she gasped or cried out, could see the memories playing behind his eyes. Talk to me, she managed between contractions. Distract me. What should I talk about? Anything. Tell me about the ranch, what you're planning for spring. So he talked, his voice steady, even though his hand trembled. He told her about expanding the herd, about a new bull he was considering purchasing, about plans to repair the barn roof before next winter. Mundane things that anchored them both to the future, to the life they were building together. Mrs. Chen arrived mid-afternoon, her calm presence immediately settling the room. She examined Evelyn with gentle efficiency. You're doing well. About halfway there. The baby's positioned correctly, heartbeat is strong, everything looks normal. Lucas exhaled sharply, relief visible on his face. You're sure? As sure as I can be at this point. But birth is unpredictable, Mr. Reed. All we can do is watch carefully and respond to what happens. The afternoon bled into evening. The contractions grew stronger, closer together, until Evelyn lost all sense of time. There was only pain, breath, Martha's steady voice coaching her through each wave, Lucas's hand in hers anchoring her to the world. I can't do this, she gasped during a particularly brutal contraction. It's too much. You can, Lucas said fiercely. You're the strongest person I know. You can do this. I'm scared. I know, so am I. But we're doing it anyway. Mrs. Chen checked her again as twilight darkened the windows. It's time to push. The baby's ready. Terror and determination warred in Evelyn's chest. This was it. The moment that had killed Sarah. The moment Lucas had been dreading for months. She looked at him and saw the same fear reflected in his eyes. Don't leave me, she whispered. Never. He moved behind her, supporting her back, his arms around her. I'm right here. We're doing this together. The pushing was agony beyond anything she'd imagined. Her body felt like it was tearing apart, the pain so intense she couldn't breathe through it. She heard herself screaming, heard Martha's calm voice telling her when to push, when to breathe, heard Lucas whispering encouragement against her ear even though his voice shook. I can see the head, Mrs. Chen said. One more push, Evelyn. One more. She bore down with everything she had, her entire world narrowing to this single effort. The pain reached a crescendo, impossible and overwhelming, and then suddenly, release. A baby's cry split the air. It's a girl, Mrs. Chen said, her voice warm with satisfaction. A healthy baby girl. Evelyn collapsed against Lucas, gasping for air, her body shaking with exhaustion and shock. Lucas was crying, silent tears streaming down his face as he stared at the tiny, bloody infant Mrs. Chen was cleaning. She's alive, he whispered. You're alive. You're both alive." Mrs. Chen wrapped the baby in a soft blanket and placed her in Evelyn's arms. "Here's your daughter, Mrs. Reed, perfect and healthy." Evelyn looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and absolutely beautiful. Her daughter, hers and Lucas's. She counted fingers and toes by instinct, saw the dark fuzz of hair, the miniature perfection of her features. Their baby was real and alive, and everything they'd hoped for. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Lucas reached out with a shaking hand to touch their daughter's cheek, his expression transformed by wonder and relief and overwhelming love. "She's perfect. She's ours." Mrs. Chen worked efficiently, delivering the afterbirth, checking to make sure Evelyn was healing properly. "Everything looks good. You did beautifully. No complications, minimal tearing. You should recover quickly." Martha was beaming, tears in her own eyes. "I told you. Most women survive. Most babies live. You just needed to believe it." Lucas helped settle Evelyn more comfortably against the pillows, then sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, both of them staring at their daughter with dazed wonder. The baby had quieted, her eyes trying to focus, her tiny hand gripping Evelyn's finger with surprising strength. "What should we name her?" Evelyn asked softly. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. "I'd like to call her Emma, if that's all right with you. It's what Sarah wanted to name our daughter, but if it's too painful, Emma is perfect." Evelyn understood the healing in it, the way naming this living child with the name meant for the one who died could close a circle of grief. "Emma Reed, welcome to the world." That night, after Mrs. Chen had checked them both again and pronounced everything satisfactory, after Martha had helped Evelyn wash and change into a clean nightgown, after the baby had nursed for the first time with instinctive efficiency, Evelyn lay in bed with Emma sleeping in the cradle Lucas had built. Lucas sat in the chair beside them, unable to look away from his daughter. "I thought this moment would destroy me," he said quietly. "I was so certain history would repeat itself, that I'd lose you both. But you didn't. No." He reached into the cradle, his large, rough hand gentle on Emma's tiny chest, feeling her breathe. "You were both so strong, stronger than my fear. We did it together." Lucas moved to the bed, lying beside Evelyn carefully, mindful of her exhaustion and soreness. "Thank you for giving me another chance at this, for being brave enough for both of us when I couldn't manage it. You were brave too. You stayed. You believed, even when it terrified you. I had no choice. Losing you would have been worse than any fear." Emma stirred in her cradle, making small sounds. Lucas was up immediately, lifting her with careful hands, bringing her to Evelyn. They sat together in the lamplight, their daughter between them, and Evelyn felt something settle deep in her chest. This was family. This was home. Not the place, or the work, or even the marriage. This. The three of them together, bound by love earned through honesty and effort and choosing each other every single day. The weeks following Emma's birth were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Evelyn's body healed slowly, her strength returning incrementally. Lucas took over even more of the household work, insisting she rest and focus on the baby. Martha stayed for 2 weeks, teaching Evelyn the mysteries of infant care, how to swaddle, how to interpret different cries, how to nurse without destroying her nipples. "You're a natural," Martha said, watching Evelyn calm a fussing Emma. "And she's a good baby. Count your blessings." Emma was indeed a good baby, eating well, sleeping in reasonable stretches, healthy and growing. Lucas was completely besotted. Evelyn would find him standing over the cradle just watching Emma sleep, his expression soft with wonder. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with her at night when she was fussy, sang to her in his rough, unpracticed voice. "I never got to do this with my first Emma," he said one night as he rocked their daughter. "She died before I could know her. This is a gift I didn't think I'd get twice." Winter deepened around them, but inside the house there was warmth and life, and the constant small demands of an infant. Evelyn moved through exhaustion into a new rhythm, learning to function on broken sleep, finding satisfaction in her daughter's growth and health. In February, during a brief warm spell, they bundled Emma up and took her outside for the first time. She stared at the huge Montana sky with wide, wondering eyes, and Evelyn felt her heart swell. This was her daughter's world, vast and beautiful and harsh. Emma would grow up tough and capable, shaped by this land the way Evelyn herself had been reshaped. She'll be a ranch girl, Lucas said, reading her thoughts. She'll learn to ride before she can walk properly. She'll know how to mend fence and brand cattle and read weather in the sky. She'll also read Shakespeare and do mathematics and know there's a world beyond this valley. Of course, but she'll choose to stay, because this will be home to her in a way it had to become home for you. Evelyn considered that. He was right. Emma would never know the dislocation of leaving everything familiar, the fear of starting over in a strange place. This ranch would be her foundation, not her refuge. The thought was both comforting and bittersweet. Spring came early that year, snow melting in March, the valley turning green by April. Evelyn returned to the garden with Emma strapped to her back in a carrier Lucas had fashioned from canvas and leather. She planted seeds while her daughter gurgled and cooed, content to be outside in the fresh air. The work was harder with a baby, but also more meaningful. Every potato she planted was food for her family. Every bean, every carrot, every onion, all of it feeding not just her and Lucas now, but Emma. She was building the future, quite literally growing it from the earth. Lucas expanded the herd that spring, the ranch prospering under their joint management. With Evelyn handling accounts and household management, he could focus on the livestock and land. They worked as true partners, each contributing their strengths, covering each other's weaknesses. On their first anniversary, Lucas gave her a gift that made her throat tight with emotion. It was a small wooden box, beautifully made, with her initials carved on the lid. Inside was the return ticket he'd given her a year ago, now carefully preserved behind glass in a simple frame. "I thought we should keep it," he said. "Not because you need it, but because you chose to stay. Every day for a year you chose this life, chose me. That matters." Evelyn held the framed ticket, remembering the frightened woman who'd carried it in her trunk like a talisman. She was so different now, stronger, more confident, deeply rooted in this place, in this life. "I want to do something with this," she said slowly. "Not destroy it, but repurpose it." "What do you mean?" "Martha mentioned a woman in town, a widow with 3 children, desperate circumstances. What if we use this ticket to help her? Give her a chance to start over somewhere, the way you gave me that chance?" Lucas's face transformed with understanding and pride. "That's perfect. That's exactly what it should be used for." They rode to town the next week and found the woman Martha had mentioned, Clara Walsh, thin and worn, struggling to keep her children fed after her husband had died in a logging accident. Evelyn sat with her in the boarding house room they could barely afford and explained the offer. "It's a train ticket east, to wherever you have family or friends. A chance to start over. No strings attached." Clara stared at the ticket as if it might disappear. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "Because someone did it for me. Because I understand desperate choices. Because having options, real options, can be the difference between survival and despair." Clara took the ticket with shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. "I have a sister in Ohio. She's been begging me to come, but I had no way to get there. This is... Thank you, thank you." On the ride home, Lucas reached over and squeezed Evelyn's hand. "You're extraordinary, you know that?" "I'm practical, like you taught me." "No, this is more than practical. This is compassion. This is seeing yourself in someone else's struggle and choosing to help." That summer, as Emma learned to crawl and then to pull herself up on furniture, Evelyn realized she was pregnant again. The discovery came with less fear this time, more confidence. Her body had done this before and survived. She could do it again. When she told Lucas, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her close and said, "I won't lie. I'm still scared, but I'm also grateful. And I believe, truly believe, that you'll be fine, that we'll welcome another healthy child to this family." "You really believe that?" "I do. You've taught me that hope isn't foolish, it's necessary, and you've never let me down yet." The pregnancy was easier this time, less nausea, less exhaustion, her body knowing what to do. She worked through most of it, only slowing down in the final weeks. Their son was born in March, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and made the air crackle with electricity. "A storm baby," Martha said, laughing as she helped deliver him. "He'll be spirited, this one." They named him Thomas after Tom Crawford, who'd become one of Lucas's closest friends. Thomas Reed came into the world hollering, strong and healthy, his grip fierce when he wrapped his tiny hand around his father's finger. "Two children," Lucas said wonderingly as he held his son. "Two healthy children. A year ago, I didn't dare dream of this. We're blessed. We're more than blessed. We're a family." The years that followed were full of the controlled chaos of raising children on a working ranch. Emma grew into a fearless toddler who followed her father everywhere, insisting on helping with every task. Thomas was indeed spirited, into everything, keeping Evelyn constantly busy. The ranch prospered. Lucas's careful management and Evelyn's sharp accounting skills meant they were not just surviving, but thriving. They added more cattle, improved the buildings, purchased better equipment. The work never ended, but it was satisfying work, building something permanent and valuable. More children came. Another daughter they named Rose, then twins. A boy and girl they called James and Lily. The house that had seemed so empty when Evelyn first arrived was now bursting with life and noise and constant activity. "Sometimes I can barely remember the silence," Evelyn said one evening as she rocked the twins to sleep, while Lucas read to the older children. "Do you miss it?" Not for a second. She looked around the room. Lucas in his chair with Emma and Thomas leaning against him, listening raptly to his story. Rose building something with wooden blocks, the twins finally sleeping in her arms. This was everything she'd never known to hope for. Family. Home. Purpose. Love so deep it was woven into every moment of every day. On their 5th anniversary, they rode up to the ridge where Lucas had first shown her the ranch. The valley spread below them, green in the June sunshine, cattle grazing peacefully, the house and buildings neat and prosperous. 5 children were back there with Martha, who'd come to watch them for the afternoon. 5 years, Lucas said. 5 years since you stepped off that train. Terrified and desperate and trying to pretend I was brave. You were brave. You just didn't know it yet. Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been, broken by loss, stripped of everything familiar, making a ruthless choice out of necessity. She'd come west expecting survival at best, endurance, getting through each day. Instead, she'd found a life richer and fuller than anything she'd imagined. "I'm glad the doors closed in Boston," she said. "I'm glad I had no other options. Because if I'd had any other choice, I might not have found this. Found you. Found myself." Lucas pulled her close, his arms around her as they looked at their land, their life. "Best risk I ever took. Marrying a stranger from Boston who didn't know anything about ranching. Best risk I ever took. Marrying a taciturn cowboy in the middle of nowhere." They laughed together, easy and comfortable, the laughter of people who knew each other completely and loved what they knew. Whatever fears and uncertainties they'd started with had been burned away by years of shared work and honest partnership, leaving something pure and unshakable. As they rode back down to the house, Evelyn thought about the return ticket, now helping its 3rd desperate woman start over. Each time they heard of someone in need, they offered the same choice Lucas had given her, a way forward, freely chosen, with dignity intact. "We should make this permanent," she said. "Not just the ticket, but the idea. Help women who need options. Give them what you gave me." "How?" "I don't know yet. But we have resources now. We have knowledge. We could make a difference." Lucas considered this. "We could. Maybe set aside part of the ranch profits, create a fund, help women get training, or passage to family, or whatever they need to build a new life." Exactly. Over the following years, they did exactly that. The Reed Foundation started small, helping 1 or 2 women a year. But it grew, became known throughout Montana Territory and beyond. Women who'd lost husbands, women fleeing bad situations, women who simply needed a chance found their way to the Reed Ranch, where Evelyn would sit with them over coffee and talk about options and possibilities and the courage it took to choose change. "You're making a difference," Martha said, watching Evelyn counsel a young widow. "Real, tangible difference in people's lives." I'm giving back what was given to me. Seems only fair. The children grew. Emma turned into a skilled horsewoman who could work cattle as well as any ranch hand. Thomas showed a head for numbers and started helping with the ranch accounts. Rose had her mother's practical determination. The twins were inseparable, partners in all their adventures. Lucas aged into the role of patriarch with grace, his face more deeply lined, but his eyes warmer. The grief that had shadowed him when Evelyn first arrived was gone, replaced by quiet contentment. He was a man at peace with his past, engaged with his present, hopeful about his future. On their 10th anniversary, their children now ranging from 9 down to 5, Evelyn stood in her garden in the early morning light. The valley was green and gold, the mountains sharp against the sky. She could hear her family waking in the house, children's voices, Lucas's deeper tones, the ordinary sounds of a household coming to life. She thought about the empty house in Boston, where she'd made the desperate choice to come west, about the train journey that had carried her across half a continent, about the frightened woman who'd stepped onto the Stillwater platform expecting survival and nothing more. That woman was gone, transformed by this place and this man and the life they'd built together. In her place stood someone strong and capable and deeply rooted, someone who'd found not just survival but joy, not just endurance but purpose, not just partnership but love. Lucas came out to the garden, coffee in hand, their youngest daughter on his hip. He handed Evelyn the coffee and kissed her forehead. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything, how far we've come, how grateful I am." "For what?" "For your honesty, for the choice you gave me, for every day of these 10 years. She looked at him, this man who'd offered her dignity when she had nothing, who'd given her space to become herself, who'd loved her not despite her fears but through them. "For choosing me, even when it was difficult. Choosing you was easy. Staying patient while you learned to love this life. That took effort, but it was worth it." He set their daughter down to play in the dirt. Every hard day, every moment of fear, all of it was worth it to end up here. They stood together in the garden they'd planted, watching their daughter pick up pebbles and examine them with intense focus. Around them, the ranch hummed with life and purpose. Inside the house, more children were laughing. In the pastures, cattle grazed. In town, women they'd helped were building their own new lives. This was the future Evelyn had chosen on that desperate day in Boston. Not the future she'd imagined, but something infinitely better. Real and hard and honest and filled with a love that had grown from partnership into something unshakable. The last choice had become the best choice. The stranger she'd married had become her home. And the risk she'd taken had become the foundation of everything good in her life. Evelyn Reed, born Evelyn Hart in a city that felt like another lifetime, had found exactly where she belonged. Not through luck or fate, but through courage and work and the daily choice to build something real with a man who'd offered her nothing but honesty and the freedom to choose. And that, she thought, as Lucas took her hand and they walked back to the house together, was more than enough. It was everything. It was home.